I mean, you're f***ed if you think Jason Witt can beat Brian Barberena 100%.
I'll say this, just like I said in that video. If Chris Grutzmacher beats Rafa Garcia, I become the biggest Chris Grutzmacher stan there's ever been out there.
Redman challenged me in the comment section this week, saying that Chris Grutzmacher was going to get the win over Rafa Garcia by submission. I said if you get the submission win, I would do a shot of Poirier's hot sauce. Unfortunately for me, Grutzmacher won. You know what? That's close enough. So you got it there. You got it there. There you go. I mean, this is a giant shot glass, so you get that. I'm not looking forward to this one. Apologies for the picks. I mean, the tape study was there, but it's been a bad couple weeks for the boys, so cheers. Oh. Let's get into it. Working on fitness. You're my witness. Ciryl Gane, Derrick Lewis. Let's get into it. So I'll be the contrarian, but I do like Ciryl Gane. Again, lateral movement, switching stances. To me, he's got that full complete package. He's going to get tested by Volkov. And what a card we have coming up this weekend. UFC 265 for the interim heavyweight championship. Ciryl Gane taking on Derrick Lewis. And as always, one half of your host, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, Matt Allen on the respective socials at Matt Allen FNP and at Matt Allen FNP. Hopefully people enjoyed the intro to this card as much as we enjoyed watching the fights in the weekend. I don't know. It was just a disappointment after a disappointment. It was almost like the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme song just kind of played, all weekend for both of us. It was an absolute shit show. What's your takeaway from last weekend?
We got a lot of picks wrong, and that's okay. It happens sometimes. I feel like the breakdowns were still all right. Maybe I'm trying to put out fires that have already burned themselves down, but still, I do feel like the analysis was there. New week, though. New set of picks. Here's the great thing about this card, too. I know a lot of people are down on this because, of course, we probably don't need an interim heavyweight title. I'm still happy we're getting the fight in the main event, though, and that's the thing that can't be overshadowed. I know the title isn't really justified, but the fact that Derrick Lewis is fighting Ciryl Gane is something that anybody can get excited for. I know I've been somewhat critical, maybe super critical of Ciryl Gane throughout his rise in the UFC, but he is undeniable at this point. Just the murderous road that he has gone through, the amount of experience that you can say for a guy who's only had 9 fights is ridiculous. And with Derrick Lewis, one of the most fun fighters inside and outside of the cage, you know when he fights, it's always going to be a big deal. And it's not all that often you get a home crowd advantage in MMA, but Derrick Lewis is going to have that this weekend.
Derrick Lewis is going to have that in the main event, in the co-main event. 2 Brazilian powerhouses, Jose Aldo Jr. taking on Pedro Munhoz. I can't wait for it. Let's throw it on over to our fight of the night screen. As always, presented by Manscaped. Check them out, manscaped.com. Use promo code FNP. You're going to get 20% off and free shipping with the fight of the night screen. And when we're talking about a possible fight of the night, I didn't want to stray too far away from that co-main event because you have absolute fireworks and a couple of guys that love to throw leg kicks. And for Jose Aldo, the thought process and the game plan was really kind of thrown out the window. You know, the last 5-6 fights, we haven't seen as many leg kicks. And then all of a sudden he moves down to 135, regains Soul Glory, starts to throw leg kicks again. Pedro Munhoz, a willing and game dance opponent here. What are you thinking?
Pedro Munhoz is a walking fight of the night. He just is. And he's gotten to that sort of mythical status in his career where, listen, is he going to win all of his fights? No. But are they all going to be really fun to watch? Well, of course. Because he is what you said. Well, I guess both these guys can be described as this: overhands and leg kicks. And I think we all love overhands and leg kicks. The great thing about Munhoz, too, is you look at his record, he has never been finished. Not by submission nor by knockout. And he has an absurd ground game, so no one wants to take him down in the first place. So his fights tend to just devolve into brawls. brawls, and no one's happier to forego technique in pursuit of a brawl than Jose Aldo. Like, he could be really fancy, stay behind the jab and work in his leg kicks, but we know what Jose loves to do. He loves to rip body shots, throw wild hooks up top. This fight is going to deliver.
Absolutely love this one. And for our second pick, Sung Yadong taking on Casey Kenney. A couple guys coming off of losses. For Yadong, it was a unanimous decision loss to one Kyler Phillips, a training partner of Casey Kenney. For Casey Kenney, a split decision loss to Dominic Cruz where he got outstruck, he got taken down a couple of times. To me, I watched that fight and it just wasn't a Casey Kenney type fight because he didn't really initiate everything. He didn't work in his own takedowns. He was just content to play the Dominic Cruz game. It didn't work out. For Sung Yadong, the same thing can be said against Kyler Phillips, but when you put both of these two guys together and you listen to what both guys have been saying before this fight, they want to make it fun. They want to make it exciting. They want to earn some bonus money. I absolutely love this one.
The bantamweight division is here. Like, there's not an accident that both of our fights for our fight of the night screen happen to be in this bantamweight division. Sung Yadong and Casey Kenney are barely even ranked, and we feel like this fight might be the best one on the whole card because Sung Yadong is an incredibly crisp boxer. And listen, both these guys do have claims that they won their last fights if you really want to pick and choose moments here or there. But I gotta be honest, I thought Cruz did beat Kenney, and I thought Phillips beat Sung Yadong. But I'll be honest, I'll be very surprised that either one of these guys will be on a 2-fight losing streak after this fight. Like, there's such high expectations attached with Sung Yadong and with Casey Kenney that both these guys really need a win at this point in their careers. So I do feel like we're going to see the best version of both guys.
Craziest thing, Sung Yadong's been around for a few years now. He's still only 23. And for Casey Kenney, it seems like he just came into the UFC, but he's had a ton of fights. He said it in an interview with James Lynch with All Access MMA. 7 fights in a year and 11 months. It was crazy. So this one should absolutely deliver. Kenney coming in fit and fresh. And for Sung Yadong, this is a guy at a Team Alpha Male now that just continues to round out his skill set. And if you want to round out your grooming game, make sure you check out Manscaped. Manscaped.com. Use promo code FNP. You're going to get 20% off and free shipping. I'll talk about shaving my nuts on the road later on in the show, but we got a great slate of fights. And we have a great card coming up this weekend. It's the return to giant paper notes. I had a great opportunity to write them down. You saw them in the intro. And listen, we've got a lot of second-time outs for certain fighters. Munoz taking on Simmons. You got Victoria Leonardo, second-time out, taking on the newcomer Melissa Gatto. You're not going to want to miss a lot of those previews. And if you're not sick of hearing us talking, and I think a lot of people were last weekend, but fresh start for this week. We got a great second channel. It's called 15-Minute Card Breaks. And this past week, we opened one Topps Archive Signature Series. It's a retired player. You get Ichiro Suzuki on the cover. Who did we get? It was a guy that had a wicked 2007. He had 363. You're not going to want to miss that. We got a great video also coming out shortly. We opened up a box of SP Game Used. They're hockey cards, 2020, 2021. A lot of recognizable names on the big-time hockey scene. But Matt, with UFC 265, it's a great card. There's so many different fights, even ones that we didn't pick for Fight of the Night. Manel Kape taking on Osbourne. There's a lot to look forward to. I know you're excited about this card. The people out there, you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night picks. And as we always say, let's get into it. I know coming up in the main event this weekend, you have a heavyweight chart topper, but really I think the bantamweights are going to steal the show. And we've got a great one as the curtain jerker on the prelims. Johnny Munoz Jr. taking on Jamey Simmons. It's Kid Kvenbo taking on the Afro Samurai. And I was really excited about both of these guys' UFC debuts. For Jamey Simmons, it was on incredibly short notice, taking on one of the most polished strikers you're going to find in all of MMA against Giga Chikadze. And what happened? Well, Giga kicked him in the head and knocked him out cold. So you don't really love to see that. For Johnny Munoz Jr., he took on Nate Maness in his debut, and it was a weird fight because, listen, I had a hard time scoring it. Johnny Munoz had a heat-seeking missile for Nate Maness's well, really for his balls, really, and he ended up cup checking him in the first round, in the second round, in the third round.
It was uncomfortable.
The referee finally had enough and just ended up taking a point. So I'm going to read you the MMA decision scored by our fellow MMA media members for that fight because they were really all over the place. Ultimately, there were 3 29-26s for Munoz, being that he would have won every round and won by a 10-8, but ultimately, again, the point deduction. You had a 29-27 Munoz, you had a 29-28 Munoz, you had 4 28-28s, you had 3 28-27 Manesses, you had 1 29-27 for Maness. ultimately Nate Maness wins that fight, and it was just a really weird one from a scoring perspective because for Munoz, he goes for takedown after takedown. He ends up going 2 for 16 in his overall takedown attempts. It was really weird trying to watch that one because for Johnny Munoz, he's known specifically as a grappler. He finishes the majority of his fights. He had 9 minutes and 42 seconds of control time in that fight. Now, a lot of that was spent pressing Maness up against the cage. And the reason why some people might have thought that Maness won was because those little rabbit shots in close, in tight. And that's how he was able to pull away in terms of the total strikes. Significant strikes favored Munoz in that one. And the last one that I want to leave you on, we talk about how this guy is a ground fighter. He is a 10-time NABJJF gold medalist. He's also a 3-time no-gi world champion, blue belt, purple belt, and brown belt, and he won the Grapplers Quest Championship. For Jamey Simmons, same thing. He is a grappler at heart, former wrestler over in Wisconsin in university at Stevens Point, and we've seen that in every single one of his fights. He's kind of wonky. He goes for a lot of takedown attempts. This is a grappler's paradise type of fight, but it's from 2 different spectrums, 2 different ends of grapplers. So what are you thinking about this one?
This is a really weird fight because this is kind of an entry level, and I won't say clash of styles, but I do agree with you. It's a clash of styles in the way that they do grapple because for Johnny Munoz, he's a weird kind of character. What I didn't like in his last fight against Nate Maness was that he was just kind of comfortable with the control over the damage, and that was the problem. You really can't make a good argument that either guy won that fight, and that was my real big problem with it. You know, like, if you want to say Maness won, I guess, like, the slight amount of damage that he did do was probably more than what Munoz was able to get off, but Munoz definitely controlled where that fight was taking place more often than the two, so it's just really hard to separate either guy in that fight. And the other thing that you really have to take from this fight is that you can't judge either guy just based off their UFC debuts. I'm going to throw you under the bus maybe a little bit because you thought Jamey Simmons was going to be an interesting matchup for Giga Chikadze.
I thought the wrestler versus the pure striker, that's what would have made it interesting. Now, the one other thing you have to throw at this one, Jamey Simmons is definitely not a featherweight. They even said it in his fight against Giga Chikadze. John Anik basically says, you know, he's coming in. He's mostly a bantamweight. He wants to make a mark at featherweight, stick around at featherweight, and this is a guy that got a 4-fight deal to come in on short notice to fight Chikadze, so we burned one. This is the second one. For Johnny Munoz, his last fight was at featherweight against Maness, but he traditionally is a bantamweight, former King of the Cage bantamweight champ. So I think you're going to get a natural idea of where these two guys are at because they'd be small featherweights as is.
Oh, without a doubt, that is a very good point. For me, this is really going to come down to how well can Jamey Simmons use his unorthodox movement, because he does fight in a very wonky way. He's kind of like Spike Carlisle, not really, but just in the way that, like, he does a lot that you're not really expecting. And with Simmons, he will kind of throw some of those Ryan Hall type kicks to try to set up some of his takedown attempts, and he is somebody who isn't afraid to throw like a spinning back fist and then try to power double leg you against the fence. It is all very unorthodox, but that's where he does get a lot of his success from. If Simmons is getting takedowns early in this fight, I do expect Munoz to tire as this fight progresses. And the thing about Simmons is that the fact that he does a lot does really tend well to his gas tank. I do feel like Simmons will be the fresher fighter between these two, especially if it does go late. The thing with Munoz is, if he does get taken down and he is able to sweep off of his back, then I feel like this fight will be somewhat trivial for him. Because with Munoz, he's the type of guy, do you really want to take him down to begin with? Personally, I don't think so, but I don't think Jamey Simmons can do enough with sort of his pitter-patter game from the outside to really separate this one on the feet. So personally, I really do think Jamey Simmons is going to have to shoot for, I won't say a Colby Covington level of takedowns. He's not going to go for like 20, but he's at least going to have to go for 5, 6, 7 takedowns in a 15-minute fight, and those are all going to be good opportunities for Johnny Munoz to try to go for like a judo hip toss off of one of those takedown attempts, look for a guillotine off a takedown attempt, just opportunities to get Munoz's arms around him, and that's where Munoz is at his best.
That's the craziest thing. I mean, for Jamey Simmons, you want to go back and see a wild fight when he took on Jake Childers, not Tyler Childers, not the wildflower guy, the guy that sings and makes music, but when I look at him, he had that crazy fight in 2019 where he gets knocked out and submitted in the same fight. Pretty weird. You hate to see it. His last fight at bantamweight was back in 2019. And for Johnny Munoz Jr., and it can be said for both of these guys, I had to add up the totals. Out of their respective wins, this was their combined opponents' records. It's not good at all.
No.
It's 40-37 for Munoz Jr. It's 50-42 for Simmons of his 7 wins. And for Munoz, he has 10. So maybe not the highest level of competition for both of these guys moving up. For Jamey Simmons, he's going to have the familiarity of a fellow training partner also competing on this card in Ode Osbourne, both guys out of Pura Vida BJJ, and a former Fight Night Picks member and friend over on the Instagrams, Hot Take Kape. She works out of Pura Vida BJJ. You can find her on some of the older recaps. But Matt, when I had a look at the odds for this one, they dropped and changed off the bat. Johnny Munoz opened up a -150 favorite. He's -238 right now. For Jamey Simmons, opened up a +130. He's a +191 right now. It's a surprise to us as it is for you. I'm going to scroll down the page. I haven't looked at the Tapology votes yet. 837 votes, 91% Munoz, 62% by decision. For the 9% that have Simmons, 47% by decision, 33% by knockout. I have a weird time with this one again because Jamey Simmons is one of those guys that can mount a wrestle-heavy offensive. Like I said, he wrestled in university at 2 different weight classes, 149 and 157. So if you think he's small at featherweight, he's pretty damn small competing at some of those weight classes. But again, not cutting as much weight. You don't have to worry about it near as much. Munoz is going to have that size advantage in the cage. But for both of these guys, their striking defense, not the best. For Johnny Munoz, he's the type that likes to keep his arms out. That's his best striking defense. When a guy starts hitting him, he just puts his hands out and keeps his head there. And when he moves in on guys, he keeps his head on the center line. The other thing that Munoz does, he throws a lot of kicks. He throws them to the body, he throws them to the head, he throws them to the legs. That's about it. His boxing, not so much in combination, and that's from watching all the way up through.
It's a lot of single shots, yeah.
With King of the Cage, that's primarily where he spent his time coming up through. For Jamey Simmons, movement is his best defense. I think that's what you can say for him. So he kind of does get a little herky-jerky. If you back him up, he gets a little straight. You saw that against Chikadze. So ultimately with the pick, I have a little bit of a hard time here. But again, I like Munoz because if Simmons is going to take him to the ground, well, Munoz is going to be good off his back, so I like his jiu-jitsu in this fight. For that reason, I'm going with Munoz here.
That's the thing. You bring up Jamey Simmons' movement being his best form of defense, and I agree with that. But the issue is that he's using that movement to then set up some of his own takedown attempts. And just the fact that he will be initiating the grappling against a guy like Johnny Munoz Jr. tells you all you need to know. I don't think Munoz is the guy who you take down whatsoever during a fight. And I do think that that's going to have to be a key for Jamey Simmons. At least mix in the takedown. Maybe go for some of those old school like Cowboy versus Nate Diaz where he did that like weird kind of V hip toss. Just try to mix it up on Munoz. Don't let him get comfortable, especially in the grappling department. But I do think Munoz will be able to win this one if it does turn into one of those wrestling grinder type fights.
We'll have to see. And Jamey Simmons, hey, Johnny Munoz likes the high single leg, so you just got to watch out for that one. Push the head down. He knows that. And if you see Jamey Simmons win, it's going to be a lot of top pressure. It's going to be a lot of ground and pound. I don't know how well he's going to be able to fare in that respect. Matt, both of us going with Johnny Munoz to get the win. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have in this fight. Is it going to be Munoz out of California? Is it going to be Wisconsin's own Simmons? I can't wait for this fight. And our bantamweight co-main event, Jose Aldo taking on Pedro Munhoz in the main event. Interim gold on the line. It's a shot for the belt. It's Derrick Lewis taking on the former training partner of one France Gane with Ciryl Gane. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. What we have here is hopefully the final debut of Brazil's Melissa Gatto. She's going to be taking on Victoria Leonardo. And the reason why Matt furrows his brow and the reason why you at home might be wondering, well, what? Melissa Gatto was supposed to come into the UFC. She was supposed to fight Talita Bernardo. She was supposed to fight a whole bevy of different fighters up at 135 pounds. And if you go through the laundry list of fights that fell out, Bernardo, Avila, Agapova, and now she gets Leonardo, there's all different reasons for it. Now, some of them, they're injury related. Some of them say that she had to withdraw from the Agapova fight due to travel restrictions. One of them is the fact that in 2019, she tested positive for furosemide. Furosemide, it was a 1-year USADA suspension. That is a banned diuretic. So for Melissa Gatto, she finally gets her opportunity, and this is a fighter that I've been so excited and anxious to see in the cage because you look at the record, 6-0 with 2 draws, 4 of her wins by submission. She's definitely a submission ace. And I know a lot of people out there are really antsy to see her. Now, I thought it was going to be at bantamweight. Here it is at flyweight. She's taking on the former Invicta staple, Victoria Leonardo, somebody who competed in those Phoenix Rising competitions that Matt absolutely loves.
Tournament.
She has a loss to Miranda Maverick as a pro. She's a loss as, well, a pro, but in an exhibition fight on the Phoenix series. Yes, the record coming in might not be the sexiest. 3-2 in her last 5. She lost Erin Blanchfield over with Invicta, picked up 2 wins over Liz Tracy and Chelsea Hackett on Contender Series to make it into the UFC. And then she ultimately lost to Menifield in the UFC. And for me, I'm been critical of Victoria Leonardo. She comes at us from Elite Combat Academy with her husband. I had to write it down. It's Brent Mason. He owns the gym. She trains with Andrea Lee. But the trouble always was Victoria Leonardo is a good striker. She throws a lot of power shots. Her striking defense has been choppy at best. And I mentioned it in her debut. It was the fact that she took on Erin Blanchfield, ate a head kick and got rocked. And then her defense didn't come up. And then she ate another head kick and got finished. So then if you look at it against Liz Tracy, her hand's glued to her face and she wins the fight. She fights Chelsea Hackett, a striker coming out of Oceania, keeps her hand right up, ends up winning that fight. Then she takes on Menifield, and I mentioned it, keeping her hand up, creeps down a little bit, head kick, ultimately Leonardo loses. Now Menifield is of the nth degree for strikers in this division. Melissa Gatto is nothing like that. So it's going to be interesting to see, can Victoria Leonardo just go out there, play her game? Because for Gatto, I don't know if anybody out there's seen her. I implore you, check her out on YouTube. You can find just about every single fight. The last time she fought was in a Chris Cyborg promotion. Her striking's not great. She hasn't fought or won in a very, very long time. If we bring it up in front of us, it's been 2 years and 9 months was the last time she was out there. She fought Karolina. She was getting absolutely beaten down in that fight until she gets a Hail Mary. They say it's a Kimura. The camera angle's not on the arm. To me, it looked like an arm bar, but you couldn't really see it. The point was, Hossa was totally outstriking her. Hossa took her down a couple of different times, slammed her down, was all over. And I've seen Melissa Gatto in multiple fights get just taken down and beaten until she wins by Hail Mary submission. So it's really weird coming into this fight. Even the City Rocha fight, that was one where she gets taken down. She's off her back a lot. I even thought she lost that fight, but they called it a draw. So I really don't know what to tell you out of Gatto, because here's the thing. You can look at all the tape. I don't think she looks very good in the tape. But she's had 2 years and 9 months to get better, so it's tough to tell what you're going to get this weekend.
I think you're selling Gatto as low as possible. And listen, I'm not here to tell you she's going to be a future top 15 talent, but you're looking at her like she's a late second round draft pick in the NBA, and I feel like she has some like early second, late first round traction. I really do. When you look at her bottom game especially, she's a very dangerous fighter, and just having a very developed bottom game in women's MMA especially can take you very far. Look at the early part of Mackenzie Dern's career. Mackenzie Dern couldn't strike for she couldn't get a takedown to save her life, and all she had was her jiu-jitsu. It still worked, though, and it still got her to a point where, okay, you might not have the striking and wrestling right now, but since you have that jiu-jitsu, go out there and just try to win fights with your jiu-jitsu. Train your boxing and train your wrestling in the secret, and then show them when you have to show them. And that's the real big thing for Gatto. I feel like she does have a much bigger and more diverse skill set. It's just the fact that her takedown defense, A, isn't great, but I think there is kind of a B side to that coin, where it's, if you're as good as she is at jiu-jitsu, why do you care if anybody takes you down? You submit 90% of the fighters you fight off your back anyways, and the majority of women's fighters who you're fighting against don't have near the jiu-jitsu credentials that you do. I just think Gatto is a slightly more special talent than what you've sold her as. And listen, I know a win 2 years ago over Karolina doesn't mean everything, and it doesn't even mean that much, but there's a ton of fighters who come into the UFC who beat a fighter that neither one of us heard of until the week that we filmed these shows, and then we go back and watch those fights. At least that's a quality win early on in her career. And the thing is, she has a good skill set to build upon. If you have a background in something, this has been my key. And this is something I always look for a lot in fighters. It's when they get hurt or when they're tired, what is their default? What do they switch to? Like some fighters, if their background's wrestling, they get hurt, well, they're a panic wrestler. They immediately shoot. With Melissa Gatto, she's so comfortable off her back that, yes, there is some of that Louis Smolka. She'll give up rounds that might not always look great. But the fact that she is so deadly off her back means that she can submit anyone at any point. And I really do feel like with 2 years off at only the age of 25, she'll have done nothing but improve in her last 2 years off. And I do understand that there are some injuries involved with that, but none of the injuries that she had were like Orion Kosei injuries, where it's like, wow, really, really serious, but nah, don't worry, I'll just like eat my vitamins and run on the treadmill. I think Victoria Leonardo is the fighter that we thought she was, though. When she does face that upper echelon, she does tend to lose. And I'm not here to tell you Erin Blanchfield's anything special either, but Erin Blanchfield is at least a solid fighter. No, I'm not trying to sell her short either, but when you look at her losses, and especially the bad ones, anytime she fights a fighter who does have at least a more developed skill set than just your average fighter, she does tend to lose. And even look at that Menifield fight. Even though her hands were up for the majority of it, my issue is that her defense doesn't shift during a fight. Look at Brandon Moreno, for instance. Brandon Moreno will start some rounds with his hands high. He'll start some rounds with his hands low and move a lot. Like, he can switch it up defensively.
Craziest thing is on this card, and you gotta check it out, and I know we're halfway through this video, but the Osbourne interview that we have with him, he sings the praises of Brandon Moreno for being such a technical guy to switch his game plan up mid-fight, and it's a really special thing to see.
Sometimes I know what I'm talking about, Craig. But with Victoria Leonardo, it's almost like she has, okay, my hands have to be up and this is my defense. But she just keeps her hands up. Like, you still need to move your head. You still want to parry shots when you keep your hands up. The point isn't just to have these two things that, okay, when you hit my hands, you're not hitting my face. You still need to have some defensive skills behind that, too. And with Leonardo, I feel like she just is kind of basic across the board. She's an above average striker, don't get me wrong. But it's not like her striking is so dangerous that she's a TKO threat every time she's in there. I just think that she is the fighter that we've seen in her past performances. Whereas Gatto, there's a lot of room to improve. And I do feel like she's used those last 2 years to her benefit.
That's the thing. That's why this pick is the absolute and if you're going to come back and get all riled up, we haven't seen Melissa Gatto in 2 years and 9 months. She has an undefeated record, but she's looked bad in the fights, and she's won some. Out of the draws, I thought she lost her last draw, so take that for what it's worth. Leonardo's striking defense isn't anything spectacular. She's well-rounded, I would say, but that's about it. So if we do look at the odds for this fight, might be a surprise. It might not be. The fighter that hasn't lost the fight is the favorite. She opened up a -110. She's -132. For Victoria Leonardo, open a -110. She's a +107 or thereabouts. If we head over to Tapology, 835 total votes, 82% Gatto, 62% by submission for the 18% that have Leonardo, 76% by decision. I just haven't seen Melissa Gatto in a really long time. I have no idea what you could get out of her. Again, is she going to be like my reference to last week? Is she going to be like a thief in the night? Is she going to have this great added kickboxing? She trains out of MSP down in Rio. It's an all-women's gym. I thought the neatest part of it is, when I looked it up, the fact that their wrestling coach has one of the most interesting names I've ever seen in all of MMA. It's Leonardo Chocolate. I don't know if that's his real name. That's what Tapology has it as. But when I do look at this one, from Gatto, I don't like the striking. I don't like the wrestling defense. If Leonardo gets on top, I like her top pressure. So I'm going with Leonardo. And I know, again, I set it up a couple of different ways. Melissa Gatto, it cannot be denied, has one of the best bottom games you're going to find at 125 or 135. So it's incredibly dangerous. And if she's added to her skill sets, she has a great opportunity to win here. There's multiple different paths to victory for her. I think for Leonardo, you just got to grind it out. And that's who I'm going with.
You kind of sound like in Mrs. Doubtfire when they're interviewing the different nannies, and there's that one who comes in and she's like, I don't do cooking, I don't do cleaning, I don't do kids, I don't do laundry. That's like you describing Gatto's game. I don't like her striking, I don't like her wrestling. Well, none of it's very pleasant to watch. I'm going to take the prospect in Gatto and at least the promise that she has improved and the potential of her improvements over the floor of Leonardo. With Leonardo, I feel like she will win some of the striking exchanges, but at a certain point, she is going to tire. And when she does tire, she will be more susceptible to getting taken down. And the thing about Gatto is that she's dangerous off her back. If she were to get top control on Leonardo, I feel like this fight would be over very fast. So I'm ever so slightly going to pick Gatto, but this is one of those fights where one of us is going to look really stupid no matter what.
All right, Matt. Well, I can't wait for this one. Leonardo, Gatto, we're split on the pick. But we got a big time card coming up. The bantamweights are going to steal the show. And in the main event at heavyweight, you've got Ciryl Gane taking on Derrick Lewis for that interim strap. So you're not going to want to miss that. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. In a fight that was originally scheduled for July 17th, we have Miles Johns representing Fortis MMA taking on Brazil's Anderson dos Santos. And unfortunately for Anderson dos Santos, he went a little Fed smoker and he didn't follow Proto, buddy. And now we're here because he was out due to COVID protocol. So he broke Proto, now he's back, and we get this fight once again. But Matt, we talked about this 2 weeks ago.
We did.
We're going to throw it back to that video, update the odds, and give our final pick and prediction on this one. Fortis MMA's own Miles Johns, and for Chapo, which is just a concerning nickname, Miles Johns is one of those guys that I thought I had the greatest read on him coming into the UFC. He was a former LFA bantamweight champ. He beat Adrian Yanez by split decision to win that belt. He ends up on Contender Series, beats Richie Santiago. We're off to the races. Has a split decision fight against Cole Smith that honestly could have gone either way. Cole Smith really came on strong at the end of that one. And then he got finished his next time out, and now we're here. Now, I say that, he won his last fight where he knocked out Kevin Natividad, who came in on short notice, and it was an amazing knockout. But the knockout against him, against Mario Bautista, was one of those ones where it's a wild flying knee. It seemed like all momentum was stopped, and I didn't know what I could get out of Miles Johns in that fight against Natividad. Flip of the coin for Anderson Dos Santos. This is a guy that really had a huge win over a recognizable name in Ricky Simone. He beat him for the Titan Championship. He submitted him even. He takes a little bit of time. He ends up in the UFC. He fights Nad Narimani. He loses by decision. He fights Andre Ewell. He loses by decision. Then he takes on the Taekwondo master. And I joke about that, but he was actually very credentialed in Taekwondo, and Martin Day. And really all he had to do was throw hammers until he could clinch and get him down and finish him. I had my reservations in that fight. If I'm not mistaken, I probably picked Martin Day because I look at the stat line and I go, Anderson Dos Santos is how old? And that's the weird thing. Like, it's almost like he doesn't age, and he's got 29 pro fights, and he will be on fight night a week away from his 36th birthday. Can you believe that?
It really is wild. And on a fight card that has a 44-year-old Marion Renault in the co-main event. These are strange times we're living in. But this should be an interesting fight. And really the only question comes down to, how good is Miles Johns, and how much stock can you put into that knockout loss? Because if you take out the loss to Mario Bautista, he should win this fight. He really should. Just technically, I feel like he is better in most aspects of MMA. And this thing about Anderson Dos Santos, I can admit I don't have a great read on him because the commentary talks like he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. How he's like, oh wow, you gotta watch out for him on the feet, you gotta watch out for him on the mat. Like, he's so good in all these areas. And then you actually watch him against other guys who, listen, it's not like he's fought the highest level of competition, but still, it's not like he's been fighting just the worst fighters ever. And then he fights Martin Day. Here's the thing. Martin Day is on the lower level of what a UFC fighter can be.
We were sold a bill of goods.
We were sold a bill of goods. But if you actually have watched Martin Day's career, it just hasn't really worked out for him in the UFC. And the fact that he's Anderson Dos Santos' only quality win is a little bit concerning. If you go back to the Andre Ewell fight, like, that's probably the reason I have so much stock in Andre Ewell, because he looked phenomenal in that fight. And in all the lead up, it was, oh, you gotta watch out for the boxing of Dos Santos. Like, I know Andre Ewell's good, but you gotta watch out for the power of Dos Santos. He just got boxed up the whole entire fight, and he could never catch Andre Ewell. He's not really good at closing down the cage or cutting it off. He really does just kind of throw bombs into a sloppy takedown attempt, and if it works, it works. It's just, I don't really think that style works against the upper level fighters in the UFC, and it's not that Miles Johns is at that level yet, but I definitely think he's more likely to achieve a top 15 status one day than Anderson Dos Santos is.
For Anderson Dos Santos, one of those guys, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, trains out of a smaller gym, I would say, and I want to get it right, Babuino Gold Team. And if you look at it for Miles Johns, we talked about it, the Fortis MMA connection. He's been there for some time now, fighting out of Dallas. And listen, if I know anything, Saif Saud's going to come in with a good game plan. If you've got the jiu-jitsu of like a Diego Fajea in your back pocket, it's definitely something good. But a lot of great training partners to work with over there at Fortis. Alright, so unfortunately the UFC had to say ta-ta there, fella, and pull the first fight, but now we get this one, and that's about all the Fed Smoker thing quotes that I really have in this one. Matt, if you take a look at the odds, Miles Johns still the favorite in this one, open to minus 200, he's a minus 210 for Anderson Dos Santos, somewhere around a plus 170, a plus 169. The Tapology votes, they're a mystery. Let's pull the page down. 92% of fans over on Tapology, 757 total votes, have John, 73% by decision. 8% have Dos Santos to win, 53% by decision. But if we've learned anything about the odds and the Tapology votes, throw them out the window. So when you're really breaking down this fight, and again, I think we gave a decent account of it the first time, what are you thinking as far as the result here?
I still like Miles Johns. Anderson Dos Santos submitted Martin Day. That doesn't mean that much to me, I'm sorry. And listen, I might be like the face of the Martin Day hater club, and I don't mean to be. It's just, he was never that great of a fighter in the UFC, and that was one of those weird fights where it was almost like he got himself in a bad position, and Anderson Dos Santos just happened to capitalize over it. I like the future of Miles Johns. I really do like his skill set moving forward. I like Johns in this fight.
I think with Johns, the pressure, the wrestling, everything that he brings into it, Anderson Dos Santos is one of those guys that one hard shot and he can knock your lights out, and from there, he can implement his jiu-jitsu. that's what makes him a really tricky, wily veteran of the game. But for me, again, I agree with you. I like the skill set of John's, particularly in this fight. So for now, we're both going with Saif Saud's guy. Unfortunately, his guy couldn't get it done in the main event last weekend, but hopefully can on the prelims. And we're taking John's. Now, Matt, I absolutely love this division. In the co-main event, you have Jose Aldo taking on Pedro Munoz. And in the main event, Derrick Lewis, in front of the hometown crowd, is going to be taking on the French fighter, Ciryl Gane. You're not going to want to miss that video and the rest. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. At 125 pounds, we have a neat clash of styles as Portugal's Manel Kape is going to be taking on Ode Osbourne, representing the States. He's a Jamaican sensation. He's a teacher by night. He's a fighter by day. Well, really, switch that one around. It'd be weird if you were a night teacher, unless you're doing night school. Maybe you're Kevin Hart, but he's related to the PFL. So now we're here. And Matt, for Ode Osbourne, there's a great interview on the channel between him and our own JHK. They talk about self-sabotage, which was something that Ode really talked about after his last win against Jerome Rivera. He also hit on the fear of success, but what I really liked was his breakdown of this fight and his overall thoughts on the bantamweight division and the flyweight division. So let's throw it on over to JHK and Ode, and we'll bring it back.
It is. It was a huge opportunity, man, because he was a ranked guy in your first fight at flyweight, but they turned around and gave you a guy that was he should be ranked, but you know what I mean? Like, he's a former champion in a major promotion coming into the organization. So what do you think about that matchup? Was Manel Kape a guy that you've known before, or was it the first time you heard of him?
I had no idea about him. You know, I was like, oh, you know, I saw that he, I saw his name pop up, and then I did some research on him, and I was like, okay, I was like, you can't sleep on this dude. He got some skills. He got some talent. You know what I mean? He's one of the dudes that he's fast. He's unpredictable. You can't sleep on him. You know what I'm saying? So I believe it's going to be a war. It's either going to be a war or he's going to fold, and I'm going to pick him apart. But who knows? You know what I'm saying? Like, all I know is I go out there and I make it a war, and you either break when I make it a war, or you make it a war. You know, there's only two options. I don't give you the opportunity to do anything else. Either I'm in your face and you fight me, or you just kind of, you know, go out quietly. But I think he'll be in my face. I mean, I think he's gonna fight me. So that I'm excited for. You know what I mean? Because I love to just fight, man. I really believe that my potential is unmatched, and I love a good test because I have yet to find somebody that can handle my stand-up. Not one person that I fought yet can handle the output that I'm able to bring. So, well, you know what I mean? I love a good test, and I think he's a good test for me, and I love that. It makes me, like I said, it makes me get off the couch. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, let's go.
So for Ode Osbourne, didn't originally draw Manel Kape. He was supposed to be taking on Amir Albazi, which I would say is not an even easier fight. No. I think Amir Albazi for Ode would be a difficult fight. Now for Ode Osbourne, you do the research on him, and he has a wrestling background, but you wouldn't know it from the way that he fights, because he is one of the most electric and speedy strikers you're going to find at whatever weight class he chooses to fight at. This is his true flyweight debut, and I can't stress that enough. The last time he fought, again, it was on short notice. Jerome Rivera, it was at 145 pounds, so it's kind of a weird one. But really, he has been a bantamweight throughout the majority of his career. He's taken on the former Ryzen bantamweight champion, Manel Kape. And Matt, I'll let you fill everybody in. I said it was a weird clash of styles because Osbourne has the wrestling in his back pocket. For Manel Kape, he's got a little bit of the wrestling in his back pocket as well. He loved to wear the wrestling shoes over with a Ryzen. And he liked to float around in the ropes. Can't really do that anymore in the cage. But for Manel Kape, you talk fast hands. This guy has fast hands too. I think this is going to be absolutely fireworks.
Both these guys bought their hand speed at Costco. Like, they have extra. They have more than they probably need at home. It's like Ode Osbourne. You open any cupboard in his house. Oh, there's more hand speed. It's a good thing to have in excess. But for Manel Kape, it's been a really interesting UFC run because I know we were extremely high on him coming into the UFC. And how couldn't you be? If you look at his run over at Ryzen, he was this unbeatable. Well, he wasn't unbeatable, but he looked so dominant by the time that he did leave that organization. And by the time that he did make his way over to the UFC, that when he got matched up with Alejandro Pantoja, who who is at the top of this division, nobody batted an eye. It was okay. Kape makes his UFC debut against like the 4th ranked fighter in the division. That doesn't often happen. Normally, even if it's like Michael Chandler got Dan Hooker. That's the type of debut that they gave Manel Kape. And he did look a little hesitant, and I do feel like that was one of those fights where, okay, octagon jitters are real. He had to get hit a couple times before he kind of woke up, and at the end of the day, if you lose to Pantoja, I don't really care. Pantoja's very, 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 very good, and he's one of those heavy-handed strikers in this division. Then if you look at Kape's fight against Mateusz Nicolau, it was a weird one, because I thought Kape was going to win that fight without a doubt. I really did. I don't love what I've seen from Nicolau. He's kind of hittable. Yes, he hits hard, and he does have great boxing himself, but there's holes in his takedown defense, and I thought Kape was going to be able to go in there and run over him. And yes, it was split decision. I know a lot of people scored that fight for Kape, but I did not.
Let's read it out, because you're absolutely wrong. 22 votes on MMA decisions. All 22 had it 29-28 Kape, and in the first round, he did what he did in the Pantoja fight. In the Pantoja fight, let's talk about it. 30-27, 2 29-28. The trouble was, and I'm going to make this a Fight Night Picks thing, it's a Keith Richards effect. And he just could never get started up. He just kept playing the same riff, and he couldn't get started. And the commentary, it was, man, this guy's really hesitant. We haven't seen him this hesitant before. And then in the Nicolau fight, the first round, it was like, okay, he's a little hesitant. And then he started to pour it on a little bit more and a little bit more. And then by the end of it, man, he looked really good. And I thought that he won that fight. Maybe you didn't. I'd like to hear everybody's thoughts out there in the comments section. But the problem is, he's been hesitant at the start of fights. You cannot hesitate with Ode Osbourne, because in his 2 UFC fights and his UFC adjacent fight on Contender Series, all first round finishes. Now, Kelleher finished him in the first round, but the other 2 were first round finishes. And he's a quick starter, too.
Oh, yeah. And the thing about Kape, and listen, I'm throwing myself under the bus because of that Nicolau fight, I feel like my expectations for him are almost too high already. Like, I think that, okay, this guy comes in top 5 ready, but even if you look at his run in Rizin, there's things that he does struggle with. Like, even in Rizin, he's kind of a hittable fighter. He does blitz in a lot. He does leave himself open to bigger power punchers. And against a guy like Ode Osbourne, listen, Jerome Rivera isn't the fighter Manel Kape is, but I still feel like Jerome Rivera is better than his UFC tenure was. Okay, no, Jerome Rivera's not great, but still, what Ode Osbourne showed in that fight was his ability to throw long-range strikes in a division where not a lot of guys can. That's what I bring up the flurries of Manel Kape. He does have good boxing, but he is a guy who uses his threat of wrestling to really open up his strikes with his hands. And when he does blitz in, he's not at Marvin Vettori level for, like, keeping my chin tucked when I move in, but he does have a few sneaky tricks. He is a good fighter who throws an overhand into a double leg, and he will mix in his striking with his wrestling. But the thing about Kape is, even if you thought he beat Nicolau, we haven't seen the same version of the Rizin fighter yet in the UFC. I still feel like there is another level of an unlocked potential of Manel Kape. I don't know if he needs a camp change. I'm not sure what it is, but I do feel like there's a better version than what Kape has shown in his last 2 fights.
Now, for Manel Kape, you talk about camp change. He's been training in the States for this one for quite some time. For Ode Osbourne, Pura Vida BJJ, he has a teammate on this card a little bit early on in Jamey Simmons, as well as our own Hot Take Kate. You can find her over on Instagram. But Matt, I had a weird kind of realization when I was getting ready for this one, when I was watching the tape study. I thought to myself, I was so high on Manel Kape. He was in my, like, Ciryl Gane level of fighters, my Piotr Jans, and you have to go back to 2018 to hear these things.
Luques.
But when you look at it from Manel Kape, I thought, okay, was I, like, alone on this hill? So I went to MMA Prospects, where there's a lot of friends of the show over there. I found the article by Sean Bitter kind of previewing Manel Kape coming into the UFC. So they gave they gave the fighter a grade. Everybody on there were 9 different people, and then where they saw his ceiling at. I'm going to read you out of the 9. There was 1 A+, there were 5 A's, there was 1 A-, there were 2 B's. But out of everybody, 4 people said he was a top 5 fighter, 3 said he was a top 10, 1 said he was a title contender, 1 said he could even become a champion. Like, he was a future champion coming into the UFC. That's the kind of fire you had behind Manel Kape coming in from Rizin. But for Ode Osbourne, this is a guy that you can't just sleep on that Brian Kelleher fight. He gets taken down, he goes to scoot off his butt up against the cage and gets into a Brian Kelleher defensive submission of Kelleher just going to crank on the neck, pull a guillotine, and get all of his body weight on top. And Ode Osbourne had to tap with his foot. So that was kind of weird.
It really was. And for Ode Osbourne, here, you like the Celtics. We can talk about that. Marcus Smart we were talking about because it's trade deadline day or free agency, could get traded. He's a great player, but his offensive IQ isn't great. Ode Osbourne's kind of like that with his defensive IQ on the mat, because that's exactly what that Brian Kelleher fight was. It was him kind of rushing to get up to his feet. He was trying to almost rush that position, and with Brian Kelleher, you can't do that. You have to go step by step by step, because if you try to jump from plan A to C and skip B, Brian Kelleher is going to lock you up with a guillotine. And when you fight a guy like Brian Kelleher, you should know those type of things. You're at the UFC, and these are the things we expect from you. He did erase that bad memory in his last fight, but I still feel like Kape is the better of these two fighters. I still like his wrestling, and I still like his ability to rush in off of his takedown attempts. I'm not putting Kape in like a Chad Mendes level, because Chad Mendes really is the poster boy for like takedown attempts into overhands, but it is a combo that he's not afraid to throw, and if he is mixing in his wrestling, it's going to keep Ode Osbourne thinking, and if he is thinking, and if he is reacting to what Kape's doing and not throwing the strikes himself, then I do feel like he's going to be one on the back foot, getting taken down or getting hit by strikes.
I mean, again, high school and college wrestling experience for Ode Osbourne. For Manel Kape, I mean, you talk about the threat of the wrestling, really it's the boxing that he uses. The neat thing that he does is if he's fighting from an orthodox stance, he throws a lead hook that's really, really sneaky. It's really fast. But then he switches to southpaw, and it's the right hook. And it's always a lead hook that you have to watch out for. He has a quick little L step, and that's the thing. When he boxes in the pocket, we talk about how quick Kelvin Gastelum can be at middleweight. Manel Kape's like that when he's boxing in the pocket with guys at 125. You can only imagine the speed difference, which is crazy because I had it written in my notes, like, Ode Osbourne's in the 99th percentile of speed. I think, again, long-range attacks, and as far as speed is concerned, he has the edge over Manel Kape, but both of these guys are quick and to the punch. So if we have a look at the odds for this one, let's see. Manel Kape is the favorite. He opened to minus 200. He's minus 203 right now. Ode Osbourne opened to plus 170. He's plus 166. He's had an extra 3 weeks of camp to get ready for this one. Let it slip in our interview that maybe Amir Albazi out due to a concussion. So not sure if that was public knowledge, but it is now. 854 total votes on Tapology, 72% Kape, 60% by decision for the 28% that have Osbourne, 51% by decision, 29% by knockout. I think if Ode Osbourne's going to win this fight, you win the first round, you show glimpses and shoot power in the second, and then maybe in the third you don't win it, but you still win the fight.
I'll be honest, if Osbourne's going to win this, I only really see it by finish. I don't think he can keep up with the combinations of Manel Kape, because if he isn't able to get a stoppage, it is going to come down to the volume. And with Kape, I understand that first round, it does take him a little bit of time to get going, but once he does get going, that second and third round are really tough to keep up with. And unless Ode Osbourne does enough to hurt Kape in that first round, I don't think he's going to be able to keep up with the volume in that second and third round. So if Osbourne can catch Kape trying to blitz in off one of those shovel hooks or a big overhand, then of course he could get the knockout win, but I ever so slightly have to favor Kape. Although he is a 2-1 favorite, I don't think he's really justified that in his UFC tenure.
I mean, for Manel Kape, his last win was New Year's Eve of 2019. He was supposed to have a fight in 2020, or he was supposed to have fights before then, but unfortunately they fell out. Even the Pantoja, that was the second booking of that fight. And he struggled with strikers. I mean, I know even Mateusz Nicolau, you would have thought, hey, he's going to implement his wrestling and his submission abilities. But for the most part, there was a lot of striking in that one. Manel Kape, again, I thought that he won the fight. I still think he's a top 5 talent. I think he's going to get a win in this one. But if you see a quick Ode Osbourne finish, do not blink. He even says that in the interview. You're not going to want to blink. You're going to watch this one. He's not, what's his name? Kai France, but don't blink. Matt, both of us going with a former Rising champion, Manel Kape. You're not going to want to miss the rest of the fights on this card.
Just so I can cut you off, if Kape loses this fight, he becomes the Rising Will Brooks in the UFC. He really does. Like, you can't be known as the guy who knocked out Kaya Skura. You beat Ian McCall. I understand that was a weird fight, but still, that's a big win. You can't be that, like, dominant champion who comes over and then you lose 3 straight fights. You had expectations coming into the UFC for a reason. People expect you to be that top 5 talent. Like, he's lost 2 fights in a row and you still think he can be a top 5 talent. Like, these are the expectations we have from Manel Kape, so this is the time where he has to go out there and justify them.
Sometimes Will Brooks fights for ex-MMA and beats Steven Seiler. And listen, it all comes full circle. But again, both of us going with Manel Kape. You're not going to want to miss the rest of the previews and predictions, so stick around. And as we always say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it.
This weekend's biggest fight that you could have taken from a time machine in 2016, a strawweight, we have Karolina Kowalkiewicz. She's taking on Jessica Penne, a couple of former title challengers at 115. For Jessica Penne, she got put on a poster when she took on Joanna Jędrzejczyk. For Karolina Kowalkiewicz, I'd say she gave a better account of herself than Penne did, but regardless, they both lost. And for both of these two fighters, Jessica Penne had a crazy long layoff between fights. She took on Danielle Taylor years ago. She was on a 3-fight losing streak, well, since she fought for the title. Then ultimately, a long time away, comes back in, takes on Lupita Godinez, the Mexican-Canadian, lost the fight, but the judges gave it to her anyway, so now we're here, Matt. And that fight was earlier on this year. She kind of just held position. It was reminiscent of when Yana Kunitskaya took on Yulia Stolyarenko. Except for Penne, a few of those positions up against the cage were at least offensive enough. For Karolina Kowalkiewicz, she's on a 4-fight losing streak, and she's kind of taken on the moniker of Darren Elkins, because it has been the damage. I added up the total strikes against her in her fights. It's absolutely insane. 441 to 245 against. That's bad. That's really, really bad. And the last two fights are the worst. 163 to 92 and 157 to 51. It's not good. After last fight, she had to get a titanium plate in her face. And it looked like that was going to be it. I mean, even before the fight, she was hinting at retirement. She said, my partner kind of wants to start to have kids. I'm giving myself a cap of maybe 3-4 years, if that. Well, it's been what? A year and a number of months since. It's been a year and 4 months since her last fight against Yan Xiaonan. The saving grace is all 4 of the losses, top flight competition at 115. So she does have that. But we haven't seen her it's been a minute, and there's a lot of damage.
It's like if I played one-on-one against, like, Kevin Durant, LeBron, and Giannis, lost to all of them, but it was like, hey, they were still good. If you lose 21-0, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And that's the problem for Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I'm actually happy you brought up that stat about the damage that she's taken in her career, because that was one of the first things I thought about when I looked at this matchup. These are two ladies who have taken an uncharacteristic or an uncommon amount of damage for this weight class. Karolina Kowalkiewicz got lit up and ate hundreds of strikes against Joanna. Now, yes, there was some give and some taken. She did make good account of herself, all things considered, but she still ate a lot of shots in that fight. Got flatlined by Jessica Andrade, which isn't good for your health. And then in her last 2 fights, has just been consistently outstruck and outcontrolled. And that's the weird thing for Karolina Kowalkiewicz. If she was in there with a wrestler, like I remember the Claudia Gadelha fight back at UFC 212, and it was like, okay, it's very much a clash of styles. You've got the jiu-jitsu of Gadelha versus the striking of Karolina. Karolina gets submitted, and I remember after that fight, even the commentary was like, that's not a big deal. She'll still be able to outstrike a lot of the women in this division. It was just, a weird stylistic matchup for her. And then you start to see her get outstruck in most of her fights. And that's the weird thing about Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I still think she has decent Muay Thai, and her comp to any other fighter would probably be Joanne Calderwood. She loves that plum clinch. She loves throwing the elbows. She loves throwing the knees. Is the damage always there with them? Not necessarily, but it's still a heavily dominant position. Even go back and watch the Felice Herrig fight that Karolina Kowalkiewicz had. Again, we gotta go back for that fight, but still, she gets her that plum clinch and just hammers her with elbows over and over and over again. And I'm pretty sure that was scored a split decision, but upon further review, she definitely wins that fight. Like, it was one of the more dominant showings that she had in the UFC, and at least personally, I felt like that was her back on track fight. It was okay. You've lost, but you've come back. We're going to see a different version of Karolina. She was just never really able to put things together after that, and it really has been a story of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I don't want to make this about Brendan Schaub, like, hey, how do you think you do wrestling Cain Velasquez? I think I do pretty well. I think you'd be surprised. I think you'd F him up. With Karolina, I do think that, okay, when you do have questions of, what am I going to do after fighting? Do I want to have a family? Like, am I going to be done doing this? Has the damage taken its toll? Then I think it's time to probably stop fighting. This isn't a sport where you want to have 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You could be a Udonis Haslem in the NBA and just be a culture guy on the bench and pick up a paycheck.
And get kicked out at the end of the season?
Yeah, but that's cool, because that's what Udonis Haslem does. With Karolina, unless you go into coaching, there's not a lot of non-contact ways to be involved with this sport. And with Jessica Penne, the weird thing is, I don't really know what she can do to go out there and beat Karolina Kowalkiewicz in this fight. Like, this fight's not proving a thing about either one of these fighters. This is like Ken Shamrock versus Royce Gracie for the strawweight division, but this is like the Bellator version of that fight, because Jessica Penne is not nearly the fighter that she was when she did fight for the title, and the same must be said for Karolina Kowalkiewicz.
For Jessica Penne, her heyday was about 8 or 9 years ago with Invicta. She was the former Invicta atomweight champ. She ended up losing to Michelle Watterson, then she ended up on The Ultimate Fighter.
had a fight of the year against Randa Marcos. And here's the crazy thing. Both of these women have fought Randa Marcos. For Karolina Kowalkiewicz, she used to have great takedown defense, and that's how we want to relay this with Marcos. I wrote this one down. Marcos went 1 of 9 takedown attempts against Kowalkiewicz. That's pretty good. Heather Jo Clark went 0 of 15.
Heather Jo Clark wasn't good.
And then you had Munoz in a great fight, who went 2 of 6, and the takedown defense of Kowalkiewicz was great. That's why I think you relayed into this fight, because it's not like it's been tested nearly as much, but she got absolutely dominated everywhere by Yan Xiaonan, who's of the nth degree. I know she didn't look great in her last fight against Carla Esparza, but it still has to be said. Yan Xiaonan's a good fighter. You have one loss, you're still a good fighter.
Calm down a little bit, though.
But she beat Karolina Kowalkiewicz in every aspect. For me, Jessica Penne, what's her bread and butter? To strike, to get it down.
Go like this like 1,000 times.
And then I'm going to get you down. She had that weird USADA suspension. She was away for 3 years and 11 months. She did have a Danielle Taylor loss, which again, you're talking about pitter-patter strikers. Danielle Taylor, that's exactly. She just sticks there behind the jab and walks around the outside. Kind of like, Zaruk Adashev at the end of a fight. But for Jessica Penne, her last time against Lupita Godinez, at least she went for it. Now, I talked about the fact that I didn't think she won that fight. I had to write it down. 11 of the people that voted at MMA decisions had it 29-28 for Godinez. 6 of them had it 29-28 for Penne. I'm still of the camp that I thought that Godinez won the fight.
The fact that you're so outraged about it is ridiculous, though.
But it doesn't matter here. So, Matt, we've had Kowalkiewicz, whose last fight was February of 2020, where she got mopped. We have Jessica Penne, who somewhat, I guess, it was controversially won her last fight. Let's have a look at the odds. Karolina Kowalkiewicz opened a -180. She's -123 right now. Penne opened a +155. She's a +100 underdog right now. They're getting close. Tapology votes, 882 total votes, 74% Kowalkiewicz, 91% of them have her to win by decision. For the 26% that have Penne, 85% by decision. The over 2.5, or fight goes the distance, and I don't care about those votes, is my pick for this one. But I want to get your idea. Who do you think is going to win at the end of the day?
Well, of course there's not going to be a finish in this, Craig, so I'll also just say that's my pick, too. I think Karolina Kowalkiewicz is more likely to win this fight because at least the takedowns of Jessica Penne aren't that forceful. It is a lot of head and arm throws, and this fight will be primarily contested in the clinch, and that's where Karolina gets a lot of her good damage off from. And I know her plum clinch isn't like Anderson Silva. She's not getting knockouts with it, but it's by far I guess it's just how she gets her best volume off, and she does throw a lot of good knees, a lot of good elbows at the middle with it. I will say Karolina Kowalkiewicz ever so slightly for an actual pick, but yeah, if I can just say over 2.5 rounds, that's the pick.
Karolina Kowalkiewicz training in Leds, Poland with one Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and they've been training together for some time, getting ready for this one. For Jessica Penne, she trains with a teammate that's on this card, and Angela Hill out of Alliance, and in around San Diego, you get to train with the Alimale McFarlands and the rest. So I like Penne in this fight. I think the takedown's going to be the major bone of contention. And for Kowalkiewicz, again, is the plum clinch Anderson Silva level, or is it Ben Saunders level? We'll find out this weekend. But for me, I'll take the fighter that's at least been active this year in Jessica Penne. I think if she gets the fight down to the mat, she's more than enough adept at least keeping that top pressure and that top control. But again, this fight's going to a decision, so take that for what it's worth. I've got Penne, you've got Kowalkiewicz. It's a weird bucket of muscles type of fight, but I'll tell you what isn't. Our main event at heavyweight, you've got an interim strap on the line. Those fights usually deliver, right? Lewis taking on Gane, so you're not going to want to miss that. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it. As always, one half your host, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. You know where it is, at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, Matt Allen. Respective socials, at Matt Allen FNP. If you're anything like me, you'll love going to UFC.com, scrolling at the bottom. If there's ever a Q&A, you read those, because sometimes they get downright wacky weird. For me, I read it last weekend. It was the fact that Colin Anglin, Brendan Fitzgerald took that one, beat it over the head. But the fact that Colin Anglin took an amateur fight before he even started training in MMA. My favorite one this week from Ed Herman's page, and I wrote it down. It was, do you have any heroes? His response, my dad, that guy that you might have seen on Pornhub one time, Randy Couture, and Dan Gable. And then the next question was, favorite grappling technique? His response, 2 words, physical domination. Matt, we have Ed Herman. He's taking on Alonzo Menifield. And I feel like if Ed Herman dusts off the wrestling shoes, that could make this one a little interesting. But for Ed Herman, late career resurgence, 3 wins in a row. He kicked poor Mike Rodriguez's nuts in his chest and ended up having a weird fight in that one. But ultimately gets the win. And Matt, in that fight, yeah, it was a really weird one against Mike Rodriguez. Before that, he beats Hadish Ibrahimov. Before that, a win over Patrick Cummins. Before that, he beat Jean Valentin in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada. You can never take that one away from me. Again, Jean won that one by split decision, but I'll forever hold that one in my heart. As an Ed Herman win, Matt taking on Alonzo Menifield, who was on a 2-fight losing streak before he took on a short notice opponent in Fabio Charant. And the weirdest thing was he was training for William Knight in that fight, where I would have thought, okay, we're going to strike because William's going to try and take me down. He goes up against Fabio Charant, pushes him against the cage, which that's a no-go when you're taking on Fabio. He has great defensive submissions. What does Fabio do? Pulls in for a submission. Uh-oh. You know exactly what's going to happen now. No, you don't, because Alonzo Menifield puts all of that upper body strength in his Tasmanian Devil frame and got him in a weird Von Flu, and it was absolutely insane. So for Alonzo Menifield, crazy win his last time out. He is a first-round king. He makes it a squash match. He's taken on a gritty old veteran, a short fuse Ed Herman, a guy that lost on The Ultimate Fighter to Kendall Grove years ago. Kendall Grove, that's crazy. But Matt, I think this is a great fight. It's a great litmus test for both guys. Alonzo Menifield, little bit of an older prospect at 33 with only 12 pro fights. Ed Herman is almost 41. He's had many pro fights. He's had 40 of them. So 40 pro fights, 40 years old. What are your thoughts?
Does Ed Herman need a litmus test fight? He's 41 years old. Ed Herman's been fighting longer than I've been alive. Almost. But the fact that that stat is almost true is very alarming. And here's the problem. You bring up Ed Herman, if he dusts off the wrestling shoes, he can make this fight interesting. I don't think so. I'm one of the bigger Ed Herman old man strength believers, but this is one of those fights, Ruben, I'm having a hard time seeing where Ed Herman's going to succeed, because I understand that Alonzo Menifield has some similarities with Hadish Ibrahimov, and where he will get tired as the fight progresses, and if you can make the fight ugly, then maybe you can beat him. The issue is that Ed Herman is 41 years old, and when he does get hit clean, he still gets hurt. He doesn't go down. He's not like Matt Brown, for instance, who doesn't have a great chin, but can still get into crazy fights. He still has a good chin, but when you hit him clean, he goes down. He at least gets hurt.
He's the type of guy that goes to put a well cap on, severs his finger, grabs the finger, and puts it back on.
Exactly. Like, Ed Herman is, like, neighborhood tough, you know?
I that's not a joke. That's a real thing. Google it.
He was getting an artesian well put in, and he wanted to know how to do some of the work himself, so he was giving the guy a hand, and he gave him more than just a hand in a figurative term. Here's the thing. Alonzo Menifield's going to probably knock out Ed Herman, and I'll be sad because of it, but that really is the prediction. Alonzo Menifield's so much bigger than Ed Herman, it's not even funny. This is one of those fights where I actually do feel like size and physicality will play a role, because I understand Ed Herman's 6'1" and Menifield's 6 feet tall, but let's not be selling wolf tickets. By the time these guys rehydrate, Menifield will be the much bigger fighter, and the problem is that Menifield throws a lot of single shots, which normally you don't really like, but the fact that he does throw single shots means he doesn't normally get tired just by striking. If you do get into a striking fight with Menifield, he can keep pace with you throughout 50 minutes. The problem with Menifield is that if you do start engaging in grappling, then he can tire down. The problem is that he's so much stronger than Ed Herman in a lot of these grappling exchanges that I don't feel like Ed Herman will be the one chaining takedowns together. I feel like he might go for one, kind of meet the hips of Menifield and be like, okay, now we're back to striking. And with Ed Herman, he can get strikes together, and when he does do it, they can start to put some damage up. But the problem with Menifield is, look at the fight with OSP before he gets knocked out by OSP. I understand it's a loss in his record, and getting knocked out by Owen St. Preux is never a good thing. But the base game plan is kind of there. It's move forward. Don't throw a crazy amount of volume, but just keep a consistent level of volume throughout the first round. And that's what Menifield was starting to do. Now, yes, he walked into a big shot from OSP, but Ed Herman does not have OSP power at this weight class. Like, Ed Herman has respectable power, but he really does need volume to go out there and hurt a guy. Pat Cummins was also a very old man by the time those two fought, so I know that was a TKO, but I really don't expect Ed Herman to knee Alonzo Menifield in a weird wrestling exchange and then knock him out. It's really tough for me to find ways for a 40-year-old Ed Herman to beat Menifield. I do think he can get together some decent combinations, but again, I bring up the point that did not work out for me last week in the main event, that Ed Herman is going to need volume, and that's going to keep him in the pocket. And with Menifield, I know he's not this crippling knockout artist by any means, but he does have respectable power at the 205-pound division, and I do think he's going to land on Ed Herman at some point. point.
I'm eager to see the kicks of Menifield, how Herman deals with them. And again, if we're in the pocket, maybe Ed Herman's able to land some volume. So you might want to look at this one second round, third round. Where are we at going in if we even make it that far? But to pick off the hop is Alonzo Menifield. I look at the odds for this one. Menifield open to minus 140. Favorite is minus 244 right now. Ed Herman open to plus 120. He's a plus 195 underdog. Tapology votes? They're not very close. 882 total votes, 85% Menifield, 87% by knockout for the 15% that have Herman, 50% by decision, 22% by submission, 21% by knockout. Matt, that doesn't add up to a clean 100%, but it's Tapology, and we have fun with it. I love Ed Herman, the fighter, but I don't have him in this fight. Again, if he's able to win, second round, third round, maybe you look at like a sneaky submission, maybe you look at it by decision. But for me, I like Menifield in this fight. I think he's going to be able to get the job done.
I feel like his wrestling defense is good enough to beat a guy like Ed Herman. It might not be good enough to take on Bellator's own Corey Anderson, or maybe, some of those
levels. Or like Devin Clark, like when they fought.
Devin Clark, yeah, that's a good example too. Just, the next level wrestler. Ed Herman, I don't think is that next level wrestler. He's a good wrestler, but again, he really does weaponize his pace and cardio, and until that becomes a factor, I don't think he's going to win a lot of the open space exchanges with Menifield. So for me, I have to pick Menifield, but no one would be happier if a 41-year-old Ed Herman found himself on a 4-fight win streak. Like, that's one of those, like, when Shogun, I know Shogun's only like 29 years old, but still, when Shogun somehow got on a winning streak and then Daniel Cormier was like, I might fight him next. I'm not saying Ed Herman versus Israel Adesanya will ever happen, but if it did ever happen, I would at least buy it.
Matt, there's been a lot of underdogs hitting lately, so maybe you like Ed Herman. You let us know down below in the comments section. You call us donkeys, you call us whatever you want. But we both have Atomic Alonzo Menifield in this one. Can't wait for the fight. Moving up a weight class in the main event. Interim strap on the line. Derrick Lewis taking on the man himself, Ciryl Gane. You're not going to want to miss that. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. Bantamweights absolutely have dominated this card, and they'll continue to. We have Drako, the great Dracolini Rodriguez, taking on Vendetta, Vince Morales, in a battle of awful nicknames. Matt, for Drako Rodriguez, after his last performance, I feel like the song Blue Boy by Mac DeMarco just kind of followed him around, because Blue Boy, he was having a decent amount of success. I know the commentary team said he looked a little stiff, but as the round went on, he looked a little bit less stiff and a little bit more like himself. And for Drako Rodriguez, you go back, you can find a ton. You can find every single one of his fights coming into the UFC from different promotions. And he's an all-action type of fighter. The only fight where you really saw him kind of concede was, against Tony Gravely, where he gets absolutely ground out. And then finally, near the end, it ends up a TKO finish, but it's just, he takes so many shots on the ground, it's not even a close fight. So for Drako Rodriguez, maybe not the highest level competition that he took on coming into the UFC, but we had a pretty good approximation of his skills and everything going into his last fight against Aiemann Zahabi. So let's throw it on over to the rookie card version, and we'll bring it on back, and we'll tell you a little bit more about Vince Morales. Make a pick on this one. For Drako Rodriguez coming in here, this was a guy that got passed over, and I remember this story. At UFC 239, he was supposed to come in on short notice and take on Chito Vera, and King of the Cage wouldn't release him from his contract.
Unfortunate.
It was after he had fought Tony Gravely for the belt and had lost. It was after he got a win there. I want to say that was January 2019. And then he was looking forward to taking the fight against Chito on short notice. He was originally booked for a King of the Cage main event against Johnny Munoz Jr., who ended up in the UFC as well. That fight fell through. Then he had one more fight with King of the Cage. At the time, the promoter and co-owner said, well, he's got 4 fights left in his contract. I know what the promoter is actually trying to do, and it's kind of weird, and you might not agree with me here, but Drako Rodriguez is young. I mean, the guy's only, 24 years old. The promoter wanted him to kind of grow in the promotion where he didn't have to take a fight way too soon. And I get it, but at the same time, if you're Drako Rodriguez, you're going to petition hard for that UFC debut. Unfortunately, he had to wait. He ended up taking a fight on Dana White's Contender Series this summer against Mana Martinez. Got a first-round triangle choke. It was a wild fight. It was a fight that was pick'em odds. But I went back and watched a ton of Drako Rodriguez tape for this one. This guy's wild as f***. Like, you look at 6 of his 7 wins are by finish. He has a 13-0 amateur record, which is insane. That's too much of an amateur career, if you ask me. It started when he was 19. And the fact that he has all these armbar, triangle choke, guillotine, what else? His first pro fight, another guillotine. He was a white belt in 2018. It's crazy how aggressive he fights. Now, the level of competition is a bit of an issue. Again, Mana Martinez getting that win was a big deal. So credit where credit's due. And that has to happen. When you're a guy in the regional scene, you're beating the guys you should beat. Then you go up on the big scene. You get a win like that on Contender Series. You get a contract. He deserved it. Kudos to him. UFC fans and prospect fans have had their eyes on Drako Rodriguez for a while. I got to talk about that Tony Gravely fight, though. Gravely! King of the Cage, territorial conflict back in 2018. He gets beat pillar to post by Tony Gravely. And listen, Tony Gravely's a good fighter. That was his last fight with King of the Cage. Then he went and dominated CES. Then he ended up in the UFC. But when he had that fight, his takedown defense wasn't great. He was fishing for submissions, but he got beaten on the ground all 5 rounds until he got finished at the end of the 5th. I worry about that a little bit, and he's still a little green, but overall, this guy's such a good prospect. His hands are great, his aggressiveness is awesome, and he doesn't give a damn about what belt color you have in jiu-jitsu. He is going to go full bore, balls to the wall. So for Drako Rodriguez, it was a swift overhand right and a punch right square to the back of his head that ended up finishing his last one. Does anything ever happen when somebody punched you in the back of the head and it's a finish? No, because nothing happens when any of these things happen.
Well, it depends. Like, there's different cases, but it's fine.
It was a punch right to the back of the head. So, for Drako Rodriguez, he went from taking on Aiemann Zahabi, a guy that showed a lot of promise, but had a few wins on his record. Now he's taking on Vince Morales, kind of in the same boat. Has a win over Aiemann Zahabi. I didn't think he beat him in Ottawa, Canada, but that's neither here nor there. But for Vince Morales, it's not, because he's 1-3 in the UFC. Barely won the one that he won. And his last time out, he fought Chris Gutierrez. He lost due to leg kick TKO in the 2nd round. Since that fight, he tore his Achilles in training right after that.
You don't love that.
So he got back to training in February 2021. I learned this from an interview he did with James Lynch with All Access MMA, so we'll give credit where credit's due. He's training now, not out of the Pacific Northwest, but out of Syndicate MMA. I wrote down a litany of training partners there, and he did say with James that he trained with one Canadian, Aaron Jeffrey, just one time, who's a big guy, and who's, I think, has a really bright future. But you also have Sasha Palatnikov, some of the lower weight classes. Gavin Tucker, I guess, was there at one point, so that's kind of fun. But the best connection that Vince Morales has in all of the UFC is a fellow Oregonian? I guess we're going to have to ask our own Joshua Hart, who's out of Vancouver. But his cousin, Ricky Simone, who's going to be in his corner for this one. He's going to have his girlfriend, John Wood, and Ricky Simone. You love to see that. He's moved full-time to Vegas. And for Vince Morales, kind of a well-rounded bag of a skill set. Fairly decent at wrestling. I think he's going to have a tough time in this one because his first fight at bantamweight since July of 2019 when he took on Benito Lopez. And he lost. Benito, where you at? I'd love to see you fight more. We haven't seen him in, forever.
It's been a while.
So for Vince Morales, looking to get off the schneid, he's taking on Drako Rodriguez. It looked good till he didn't in his last fight. You heard all of our commentary on Drako before the Zahabi fight. What are you thinking here?
For Drako Rodriguez, and I really do think you summed this up perfectly, he is one of those all-action fighters, but it will cost him sometimes. Like, he has a bit of that Daniel Rodriguez effect to him, where it's like, hey, I hit really hard, but you know what else is also true? My chin's very high. And that's going to always result in a very fun fight, and it's always going to make him one of those potential bonus threats. But I feel like this is one of those get-back-on-the-horse fights for Drako Rodriguez against Vince Morales. Vince Morales has not been great throughout his UFC tenure, and of course an Achilles injury doesn't make that any better. What I do like out of Drako Rodriguez is the fact that his volume is pretty good, and the fact that at 25 years of age, he already has a very good foundation of skills, and it's one that you can really build up on. I don't think Drako Rodriguez is a guy who's going to be in the top 10 of bantamweight for years to come, but I think he's one of those fighters who any given day could get into that like 14 to 13 range, and I do feel like with his skill set and with his exciting style, the UFC is going to push him more than just your average unranked bantamweight. So for me, I am going to ever so slightly side with Drako Rodriguez, because for Vince Morales, he just hasn't shown me enough throughout his UFC tenure. Like, just go back to his last fight. He didn't not just check leg kicks. He didn't build upon anything. Like, if you look at a lot of guys who eat a lot of leg kicks, what they do is they counter punches off those leg kicks because they realize that they're going to have to eat the kick anyways. And if you're throwing a kick, you can't move your head. You're stationary because you're only on one foot. Look at Poirier versus Gaethje in their first fight. Poirier's getting his leg destroyed and then figures out, okay, if I check straight forward and throw a straight shot, I'm going to hit him. With Morales, he just ate them over and over again. And he never really made any adjustments throughout that fight. I do like Drako Rodriguez, and I do feel like he has the higher ceiling.
For Vince Morales, going to be out of syndicate, going to have Ricky Simone in his corner. He has a wrestling base. If he wrestles Drako Rodriguez, Draco's worst attribute is his defensive wrestling. It's not very good, and he hasn't taken on a high-level competition. So leave that where it is. For the odds in this one, Rodriguez open a plus 155 underdog. He's a minus 125 favorite right now. For Vince Morales, open to minus 180 favorite. He's a plus 100 as it stands. And if we have a look at the Tapology votes, surprised us they are to you. 860 total votes, 78% Rodriguez, 74% by decision. For the 22% that have Morales, 60% by decision. This is one that I think if Drako Rodriguez wins, he might actually win by finish. If Morales wins, it's probably going to be by decision. There's a clear path to victory for Vince Morales. So you're going with Drako Rodriguez here?
I do like Drako Rodriguez in this one. I do agree with everything you said, and I do like the Ricky Simone connection, but my issue is that Vince Morales has never been a guy who throws a lot of volume takedowns throughout his fights. He can go and get them, don't get me wrong, but he's not someone who all of a sudden in one camp is going to throw out his previous game plans and just go for a wrestling heavy style. I do think he's going to have to strike with Drako Rodriguez at a certain point. I do think Rodriguez is going to start accumulating damage as the fight goes on.
That's how I see it as well for Drako Rodriguez. I think, again, if he can keep himself nice and upright, keep his hands up. He was nice and upright, and again, his back was a little straight and stiff, and when he was standing like this, he got hit by an overhand right that went right through his guard, and he dropped, and then took that extra bop to the back of the head, like the Field Mouse song. But when I look at this one, I think Drako Rodriguez can get it done on the feet. I'm going to slightly edge him, but this is a wishy-washy type of fight, and again, the path to victory is there for Vince Morales. Would not be surprised in the least if he gets it done. You let us know down below in the comments section who you have in this fight. We're both ever so slightly going with Drako Rodriguez. Should be a great one in this division. En Fuego in the co-main event. Munoz taking on Aldo in the main event. Lewis and Gane, you're not going to want to miss that. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. MMA fans enjoy fighters from Kyrgyzstan, and it's no different in this fight. We have Ataman, Rafael Fiziev. He's taking on King Bobby Green, and I can't wait for this fight because for Fiziev, well, he hasn't been a Tiger Muay Thai in a while from the IGs. He's been in the States. He's been training out of Sanford MMA. He's been at what looks like Extreme Couture in the past couple of weeks, getting acclimatized to Vegas, but I've seen him at Sanford in a lot of different pictures with a lot of different fighters. Shavkat Rakhmonov was the first time I went, I mean, he's not, like, added in this picture, but that's Fiziev, right? So, yeah, it is. He's got pictures with Gilbert Burns as well. You know exactly the drill. He's a kickboxing coach at Tiger Muay Thai, or he has been, and you absolutely love to see it. Now, Tiger Muay Thai has undergone some changes lately. I don't know. I'm going to look into it after this one about Fiziev, but I know the Hickman brothers aren't there anymore, so it's going to be a weird time there, but you know exactly the blueprint for Fiziev. He lost to Magomed Mustafayev. Spinning back kick was crazy. That's insane. Since then, beating a pretty good amount of fighters. I mean, Alex White to kick it off. Mark Chikasi after that. Hanato Moicano where he finishes him and looked amazing in that first round. Now he's taking on Bobby Green. Losses sandwiched the wins. His last time out, he was a huge favorite over Thiago Moises. Moises had that mad look to his face, and he absolutely ate Bobby Green for dinner. So the guy at a Pinnacle MMA, a gym that haven't really been winning a lot of stuff lately. I mean, just him and his training partner, Darian Caldwell, haven't had the best results. But for Bobby Green, career resurgence in 2020. He gets that fight against Moises. He was supposed to fight Jim Miller not that long ago. But another Fed Smoker reference. I mean, he didn't follow Proto, buddy. He weighed in at 156. And then he collapsed backstage, so the fight fell out. We were excited for that one. Now we get this one, Matt. So for Bobby Green, are we going Fat Joe shoulder lean on this, or what are we thinking?
Bobby Green does love to lean back, and it is really weird. Like, we don't see the shoulder roll all that often in MMA especially, and when we do see it, it's like Luke Rockhold, and guess what happens when he shoulder rolls? He gets knocked out because of it. But Bobby Green, other than the Dustin Poirier fight, who Dustin Poirier is arguably the best boxer in the UFC regardless of weight class, it does work really, really well, and he must be a very frustrating fighter to fight because, especially in his prime, when Bobby Green is beating the Edson Barbosas of the world, Actually, no, he lost that fight. But when he was fighting the Barbosas and the Poiriers of the world, like, Bobby Green was that dude at lightweight. He was kind of one of the first sort of really good boxers who, wow, he's got this unique movement. He's on a bit of a roll. But the thing with Green is that he doesn't really have the power to go along with that boxing. It is kind of odd. Like, if he connects clean, you will go down. But he really does rely on his great gas tank and his cardio. And he has good offensive wrestling, too. Go back to the Eric Koch fight. I highly recommend that because that was a fight where both guys were completely written off. People thought Bobby Green was well past his prime. And the same thing with Eric Koch. Former featherweight moved up to welterweight. Just crazy. But still, Bobby Green in that fight, he used his boxing. The stand-up wasn't going all that great for him, and immediately put on his wrestling shoes, started shooting double-leg takedowns, and put on ground and pound like he was Khabib Nurmagomedov.
And even his defense when he fought Clay Guida not that long ago, it was there too.
It really was. And for Bobby Green, he's just a fun fighter at the end of the day. He is. I don't know many people who enjoy the sport of MMA who dislike watching Bobby Green fight, because it is. He talks trash to you, he's pointing at you when he hits you, he's shoulder rolled out of the way, and he does have a crazy amount of volume to go along with it. Like, Bobby Green fights are normally fun fights. This is my problem with all of that. There's a term that's used in, I think it was Skyfall, and it's when, I know we're going off the we're going way off the cue for this, but when he's talking to the guy who makes his technology, and he's like, hey, we're using security through obscurity. And that stuck in my head. That's kind of Bobby Green. It's security through obscurity. What he does isn't normal, and that's what makes him different. When you're in there, you ever play basketball with a guy who like plays football, and they're just really athletic? What they do isn't normal, but they're still good at the sport just because they can kind of figure stuff out.
It's like meathead white belts. They're just gonna go and try and power you.
Exactly. Bobby Green isn't necessarily like that. There's definitely more finesse to it. But the fact that he is so weird with everything is a huge benefit for him. My issue with that is fighting a guy like Fiziev, who is built basically just off fundamentals. Like Fiziev, we talk about his kickboxing background and the great kickboxers that he himself has trained, much less fought. He doesn't do anything that flashy. It is a lot of that high tie style, moving that front leg up and down. He's very fast. I forget whose hand speed I said they bought from Costco, but Fiziev is probably has the fastest hands on this card, I would say.
Osbourne.
Ode Osbourne, there you go. Fiziev is probably a faster striker than Ode Osbourne, and the way that he can throw his combinations is really nice too. The weird thing about Fiziev, though, is he has good power, but he's a fighter who really decides when he's throwing his power shots and when he's throwing his strikes in combination. Even look at the Moicano fight. It's like pitter-patter, hard shot, and then that puts him down. When Fiziev is doing that kind of stuff, that's when he's at his most dangerous, and that's going to open up holes in Bobby Green's game. If you throw feints and make him roll prematurely, then you're going to catch him setting back to his midpoint, and he's going to be walking into a strike a lot of those times. I think Fiziev is too high level of a striker to fall for those shoulder rolls. Like, Dustin Poirier is a really good boxer, but I don't even think he's at the level of pure striking that Fiziev's at, and he was able to read the boxing of Bobby Green. I think Fiziev can kind of do the same game plan. It won't be just hand related. He's going to throw the leg kick too, but I don't think Bobby Green can strike with Fiziev, and I don't think he's going to just go out there and shoot double legs, so I think Fiziev's going to have an easier striking fight than a lot of people realize.
With Fiziev, I talked about the pictures, some with Gilbert Burns, some with Shavkat Rakhmonov, some with star of Here Comes the Boom, Kevin James, so you never know what Rafael Fiziev we might get. I mean, if you really think about it, Fiziev, he trained Kevin James, Krzysztof Szyzinski trained Kevin James in that movie, so Krzysztof Szyzinski wins? Is this the Canadian-Polish guy? I don't know. Matt, in this fight, when we have a look at the odds for this one, Fiziev opened a big favorite. He opened up a minus 145. He's a minus 330 right now. For Bobby Green, plus 125 to a plus 252. If we have a look at the Topology votes, I feel like I'm not going to get surprised,
Probably
but
not.
maybe no. 903 total votes, 91% Fiziev, 46% by decision, 48% by knockout. There's a slim margin to think he's going to win by submission.
I doubt it.
Hipsters. 9% have Bobby Green to win, 63% by decision. I think Fiziev's going to win this one. I can't tell you if it's going to be by knockout or by decision. You figure that one out on your own. You put the pieces out there. It's like, what are they, Lincoln Logs. I give you an assortment of them. You do whatever you want with them. I'm going Fiziev. What are you saying?
I think Green can win this fight. It's a very small margin, but if Fiziev does find himself missing a lot in that first round, and let's say he is trying to knock out Bobby Green, he's throwing nothing but power shots, kind of like Gavin Tucker did against Rick Glenn early on in their fight. It's, I'm going to knock him out. Damn, I'm way more tired than I thought I was. Oh, these punches hurt a lot more than I thought they would, and they just kind of get dominated. Again, I don't think that's going to happen, but it is a possibility, so I should throw it out there. Bobby Green doesn't check leg kicks, and he is susceptible to hooks to the head. What's Fiziev amazing at? Well, leg kicks and then throwing combinations that end in power shots. I actually like Fiziev by stoppage in this fight, and I do like it going inside the distance. I think the accumulation of leg kicks are really going to take their toll on Bobby Green, and the fact that he does have a really good gas tank just means that he's going to be more there, and he's going to eat more damage, unfortunately. I do feel like the leg kicks can eat up Bobby Green, really limit his movement, and then leave him as a sitting duck for a big shot of Fiziev.
This is going to sound weird. This is the opposite of an extreme couture fighter. Are we going to get the boxer wrestler, not the wrestle boxer, of Bobby Green? Are you going to get the pure striking of Fiziev? We're both going with Fiziev. You let us know down below in the comments section who you have in this fight. But Matt, I can't wait for the fights on the rest of this card. You kick it on over to the main card. Great offerings, including the main event, Derrick Lewis, Ciryl Gane. So you're not going to want to miss any of those videos. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. Couple of guys on the cusp of the rankings. We've got Sung Yadong taking on Casey Kenney. Couple of powerhouse gyms going at it. MMA lab for Casey Kenney. For Sung Yadong training out of Team Alpha Male. This is a guy that his nickname on Tapology is Kung Fu Monkey, but truly he does have a Kung Fu base. But he's one of those guys that has been in the UFC for a while, is only 23 years old. He's closer to 24, but 23 and 8 months. And he's a guy that's continually added to his game. But primarily, when you watch him fight, he's a boxer with porous takedown defense. And that's Sung Yadong in a nutshell. Now, the takedown defense is going to get better when you're training with the Chad Mendezes, the Darren Elkins of the world, and so on and so forth. And I think a great guy to train with for this fight is Ricardo Ramos, who actually happens to be at that gym as well. For Casey Kenney, all he has to do is hit up his buddy Kyler Phillips, who just fought Sung Yadong, who trained together, and there you go. Or train with a guy like Sean O'Malley to get ready for a fight like this. That Arizona connection. Now, I absolutely love this fight. We consider this a possible fight of the night. I'm eager to get your thoughts on this one because Sung Yadong has such great striking, such great speed with his power. Casey Kenney, you talk about guys that pitter-patter, and then they back all the way out. And then pitter-patter, and then back all the way out. I think for Casey Kenney, make this a boring fight and try and grapple.
I don't think he's going to do that, though.
No.
This is the problem. You bring up, to call up his buddy Kyler Phillips. If Casey Kenney fights Sung Yadong like Kyler Phillips did, Casey Kenney's getting knocked out in the second round. Kyler Phillips has a much more dynamic movement on the feet, and he has a much better way of rolling with shots when he eats them, because a lot of people just look at, Sung Yadong lost to Kyler Phillips. Go back and watch that fight. It is as close to a draw as a unanimous decision can be. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but yeah, I would say you'd agree. Like, that's a very, very close fight.
Sung Yadong, throughout his career, 3 performance of the night bonuses quick, and then he got a fight of the night with Marlon Vera too.
Exactly, and Sung Yadong is almost a victim of those decisions because people look back at the Cody Stamann fight and they thought Cody Stamann won. I thought Cody Stamann won. It was one of those weird Darren Stewart-Deron Wynn fights where it's like, okay, you're getting the takedowns, but you're not doing anything with them, and when we're on the feet, I'm lighting you up, but who's really going to win? So, if you want to give that a draw, I understand. Personally, I thought Marlon Vera beat Sung Yadong, but we're talking about Marlon Vera. These are the types of fighters who Sung Yadong belongs to be in there with. And if you want to say Sung Yadong beat Marlon Vera, I can't really argue with him. The thing is, his last 3 fights have all been really close, and they all could be wins, losses, or draws. We're being really honest, and it'll be really interesting to see how he approaches this fight against Casey Kenney, because I have no doubt in my mind Sung Yadong is the much better striker at range, although Casey Kenney might have slightly more power in his kicks especially. Casey Kenney has a beautiful southpaw kick. He's really good at going to the body with it. He likes to go to the leg too. The hesitation I have with Casey Kenney in this pick, though, is his cardio. With Sung Yadong can just fight for days. Like, if fights for 10 rounds, Sung Yadong and Brandon Moreno would probably be undefeated. He does have really good cardio, even in fights where he is getting taken down, even in fights where he is eating damage. He's a guy who can stay and fight for a really hard 15 minutes, and that'll be a really important key for this fight, because with Casey Kenney, I think Casey Kenney could win the first 7 minutes of this fight. The first 8 minutes might be tough, though. Even look back at the Dominic Cruz fight. And I know Dominic Cruz is a very different fighter than Sung Yadong. He has much better takedown defense. He moves a lot more. But Casey Kenney starts out strong, and then when he starts to miss, it's almost like he gets down on himself, kind of.
And the weird thing, too, if you look at that, one of the judges gave the fight to Casey Kenney. It's a split. I had Dominic Cruz winning that one. But again, you're sitting there yelling at your TV, hey, take him down. I know that's way easier said than done. Way easier said than done. And for Casey Kenney, you talk about fights being close. Look at his other fight. Look at his fight of the night against Nathaniel Wood. Did Casey Kenney win that one?
I don't know. It was really close.
And that fight did come down to cardio. Like, Nathaniel Wood got busted up that first round, but what happened in the third round? Casey Kenney's output started to go down a little bit. And Nathaniel Wood, if anything, is, well, incredibly tough, but he has really good output too. And Nathaniel Wood starts to put it on Casey Kenney. And that's actually the fight that I'm going to bring up a lot in this prediction, because Nathaniel Wood kind of fights like Song Yadong. He doesn't have the power, but he is one of those long-range boxers who does throw in his kicks. Casey Kenney does struggle at the long range with a lot of those strikers because Casey Kenney's kind of built like a T-Rex. I don't want to say he's built like Sean Shirk, but he doesn't have the longest arms in the world, and the fact that he does close range with his kicks will be really important, because if he's throwing kicks kind of like he did in the Haile Alatang fight, where there's just no regard for the power coming back his way, he can just throw power shots all day long, then I do worry about a counter shot from Song Yadong coming in the middle off of one of those kicks. Song Yadong is really good at timing kicks, and the weird thing for Casey Kenney, I always think back to the Rafael dos Anjos Anthony Pettis fight when I think about kicks and kick speed, because Anthony Pettis throws a head kick and it is incredibly fast when he was champion. I know he gets like destroyed in that fight, but still, he throws a head kick and Joe Rogan's like, wow, look how fast that kick is. And then RDA throws a kick to the body, and it's a great kick, it's a powerful kick, but there is a wind up to that kick before he throws it. Casey Kenney throws those kinds of body kicks. You know they're coming, there's just not a lot you can do about it. But if Song Yadong is able to time one of those kicks, he's going to meet him with a straight shot right down the middle. And in the third round, I do think those are going to start to hurt Casey Kenney. They might not put him down in the first round, but even look at the Pantoja fight, the Alejandro Perez fight. He lands one clean shot that knocks his head back like a Pez dispenser, and he's never been the same since.
How about Alejandro Perez? He's coming back to take on Johnny Eduardo.
Wow.
Big time fight. I can't wait for it. But when I look at this one, it is an interesting one. I listened to an interview with Sportskeeda by our own JHK. I don't know how you put it that way when he's doing work for them. But he said that he realizes that the takedowns in the fight against Cruz probably would have helped. Should have gone for them.
Just tough.
But then the title that JHK used, I think he put it out on his own channel because Sportskeeda normally transcribe them and put them on their website. But JHK puts the video version, which honestly I like more. That's why you see them more on our site that way. But regardless, the thumbnail was the title was more like Casey Kenney wants to put on an entertaining fight, wants to go out there, firefight with Song Yadong. But when I listened to the words, it was like, hey, if I take this guy down and if I really put in a good performance, that's probably the best way to win. But for Casey Kenney, he wants to be the exciting guy and fight a lot. So it's really weird. It's catch-22. Now, he did also say in that interview with JHK that he took time off after the fight against Cruz. He took 1 month off and didn't do anything. And then he dedicated himself to getting back in fight shape and getting ready. I think that mental reset is a good thing for a guy like Casey Kenney, that even going into the Cruz fight, there were a lot of distractions. He went on Sean O'Malley's podcast. He didn't have the nicest of things to say about Megan Anderson, who was also on that card. Like, there was just a lot of weird stuff. I think the month away, getting back into it, he's a guy that, and he referenced it too, 7 fights in like a year and 11 months. He's just go, 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 go. He needed the reset. This Song Yadong fight's going to be, boom, we're back into turning and burning, maybe a few more fights before the end of the year, wants to keep it busy. So I just wanted to throw that one in there, as he says he wants to go in there and have firefights, but also in the back of his mind, he knows, hey, I got to actually win the fight too. When I look at the odds for this one, Song Yadong open a -125 favorite. He's roughly a -103 right now in best fight odds. For Casey Kenney, open a +105. He's around a -114, 115. So these guys are closing in on par right now. Topology votes, surprised us as they are to you. 930 total votes, 68% Kenney, 89% by decision. For the 32% that have Song Yadong, 71% by decision. Matt, I can't wait for this fight. I think it's going to be a great one. What's the pick in this situation?
So we're going to talk about this more in the co-main event, but I do feel like this fight does shade the co-main event a little bit, or there are some parallels. Casey Kenney's a good striker, but not a fast striker, and I think that's going to bite him in this fight. Casey Kenney does kind of strike like Pedro Munoz, where it's, when I do hit you, it does have power behind it, but the issue is that it takes a second for it to get from point A to point B. Song Yadong is a great counter striker, and while I will admit, the wrestling is going to be a problem for Song Yadong, you know who just got back in the gym and is looking to make their MMA debut, or return? Chad Mendes. You know who I bring up all the time for being the best version of a wrestle boxer in MMA? Chad Mendes. I do feel like the Mendes connection is going to help Song Yadong for this fight. And again, Song Yadong in open space on the feet is a really, really tough fighter to deal with. He not only has the reach advantage, he's going to have the range advantage just by the way that he stands. And if Casey Kenney does have that fight of the night mindset coming into this fight, I fully expect Song Yadong to win.
I don't think Sung Yadong, by virtue of training at Team Alpha Male, just becomes a monster and absorbs everybody's wrestling. And I haven't seen it yet. And for that reason, I go with Casey Kenney. You talk about the Teddy Atlas comps, the putting water in the basement. I love the kicks out of Casey Kenney that you mentioned as well.
Time, though.
And I think if he does go for some of those late round takedowns, it's just going to zap Sung Yadong that much more. We've seen it. Again, Cody Stamen's a good wrestler. Kyler Phillips is a good wrestler, so on and so forth. I think Kenny's going to be able to implement the wrestling. He's going to be able to throw in the kicks. I think Kenny's going to get the win here. But we're splitting hairs between two guys that are on the cusp of being ranked and have fought fights against guys similar to this.
Here's the thing about Sung Yadong. I think he's one of the more successful Sage North cuts to ever be in the UFC. They signed him way too early. Let's just call it what it is. He was one of those fighters where, like, they signed as he's walking out. They're like, oh, at 19 years of age, he's making his UFC debut. But it did work out for him. And that's more than a lot of MMA prospects can say. It's a lot of the times where, oh, you're really young, you win, like, one fight against the guy you're supposed to beat, then they send you to someone who's good, and then you get beat really bad. Look at Chase Hooper, for instance. Like, Sung Yadong is a guy who did not have an easy way through the UFC whatsoever, and he's looked really good, and he has made the improvements. I think this fight's going to be phenomenal.
And Casey Kenney's the exact opposite. He fought for Tachi Palace fights. He fought with LFA where he was the champ. He beat Ray Borg. He beat Manny Bermudez. Like, he's beaten some names that you recognize, even Luis Smolka in the Smolka Effect Extraordinaire, where he gets the or what was it, one-arm guillotine in that one? Nice. So I've got Kenney in this one. You've got Sung Yadong. You let us know down below who you have to get this win, because they will ultimately, most likely, be ranked. And I'm surprised even Hali and Paiva, beating a ranked fighter, didn't get a number next to his name, but that's neither here nor there. We got some great fights on this card. UFC 265, the main card in the co-main event features Jose Aldo taking on Pedro Munoz. Again, parallels between this fight and that in your main event. Ciryl Gane taking on Derrick Lewis for the interim strap. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. This was a fight that was originally booked 9 pay-per-views ago. We have Tecia Torres taking on Angela Hill. Again, originally booked for late last year. UFC 256. Hill out. Torres ends up fighting Sam Hughes and brutalizes her. And it was a terrible fight to watch. But for Tecia Torres, that was the exact fight that she needed to get back, get grooving, get moving, after beating Brianna Van Buren and putting really that awful losing streak in the rearview mirror against really, really good competition. For Angela Hill, she looked like a force to be reckoned with. Lose the split decision to Claudia Gadelha. Again, maybe thought that she beat her. Lose the split decision against Michelle Waterson. Again, maybe thought that she beat her. Then takes on Ashley Yoder and looked great. Poor Yoder just couldn't get out of her own way in her last fight last weekend. So ultimately, you end up with, and I'll simplify it, a Muay Thai fighter in Angela Hill, who's really implemented different parts to her game. She trains out of Alliance. She's got Jessica Penne, who's on this card with her. Alima Lay McFarland, the whole crew down there. For Tecia Torres, training out of pound-for-pound fitness. The thing that got her to the dance was the wrestling, but she's continued to add to her striking. Again, your striking coach, a primary striker. Justin Houghton out of that camp, which is adjacent with Elevation Fight Team. So really, really good people there. Raquel Pennington, another person that she obviously trains with.
A life partner.
A life partner, some would say. So in this fight, I absolutely loved it. We've talked about it in the past. Now we're talking about it again. What are you thinking in this one?
I've got a bit of a hot take. And if you want to make a face, go right ahead. Angela Hill isn't as good as people think. And I know, Craig's not going to like this at all. But Angela Hill has yet to have a definitive win against a top fighter at the strawweight division.
I said that she was going to out Muay Thai
a
pure Muay Thai fighter against Loma Lookboonmee. I took so much heat.
Craig,
and then it happened.
And your arm's still tired from patting yourself on the back. Act like you've been there before, Craig. The problem with Angela Hill is that none of her wins are against top 15 opponents. She is kind of like Charles Oliveira before he started beating those top 15 guys. Just look through her record. The wins are over the likes of the Loma Lookboonmees of the world and the Ashley Yoders of the world. When she does fight that upper level of competition, listen, I did think she beat Michelle Waterson. I thought the Claudia fight was close, and listen, nobody wanted Angela Hill to win that fight more than me, but still, I don't think she's at that level. Like, she's been in UFC main events, but again, when you look through her resume, she just fights a lot. It's more quantity over quality when you look at her record. And I do like her skill set, but again, the fact that you were in a main event and then you fight Ashley Yoder kind of tells you where you are in the division. Like, you're good and you have a certain level of popularity, but I don't look at Angela Hill's skills as the type of transcendent skills that can get her to the top of the division. And it's interesting because I talked about with Song Yadong how he was one of those fighters, gets signed probably a little bit too early, but he does develop into something really good. Angela Hill was kind of a victim of that too. She was on The Ultimate Fighter. I think she might have only had one professional fight for The Ultimate Fighter. Loses, goes to Invicta, becomes their champion, then comes back to the UFC. And if you look at her debuting fight, or her return fight, I should say, back to the UFC, fights Jessica Andrade at 115 pounds and has a fight of the night. She drops Jessica Andrade in that fight. Makes a really good account of herself, and right from there, I was like, oh wow, like, this is the fighter who wasn't Invicta. This is the fighter who beat Lavinia Souza. Like, she was a great fighter in Invicta. The problem was that she just kind of stayed that fighter. The thing that I always thought Angela Hill was great at was the fact that she did develop new skills, but I don't feel like she's a very different fighter now than the one that we did see in that Jessica Andrade fight. She's still, like you said, she's a good Muay Thai fighter, but she didn't beat Loma Lookboonmee because of just Muay Thai. Loma Lookboonmee is an atomweight fighter fighting at strawweight. And the other thing is that Angela Hill has a great jab at long range. She does have good boxing. It's not just like she out Muay Thai'd Loma Lookboonmee. Yes, it's a part of her game, but again, I don't look at Angela Hill as the type of fighter who can go out there and beat kind of the next generation that we look at, the Marina Rodriguez's of the world, the Mackenzie Derns of the world, and those are the fighters that I look at when I look at both of these two. Because I wouldn't say that either one of these fighters have reached the Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Jessica Penne, level of their division, but they're trending in a poor direction. I don't look at Angela Hill as a fighter still on the come up. I look at her as she's on like at least the 13th hole of her career.
Now, for Angela Hill, she was supposed to fight Amanda Hebos, and then Amanda Hebos. This was after the Oder win, and ultimately Amanda Hebos has had a rough go with COVID complications. So Hill gets a fight against Torres. And again, the 4-fight skid for Tecia Torres, we talk about top competition. You bring up the Jessica Andrade fight against Angela Hill. For Tecia Torres, Andrade, Jędrzejczyk, Zhang, and then Marina Rodriguez. And then she was supposed to fight Mizuki last year. That one fell out. She ends up with Van Buren, beats Sam Hughes. With Tecia Torres, the crazy thing is, she has volume. She has power. She has wrestling. It's everything you look for. Maybe not the best at top pressure. But, well, you saw it against Sam Hughes. It was the accumulation. It was crazy. It was insane to watch. Now Tecia Torres comes in against Angela Hill. I'll mention the odds. I wrote them down. Plus 100 was where Torres started. She's minus 136 favorite right now. Angela Hill open to minus 120. She's a plus 111 or thereabouts on best fight odds. Matt, Tapology votes. I haven't peeked. Oh, yeah, 899 total votes. 56% Torres, 89% by decision. For the 44% that have Hill, 88% by decision. So if you like the over, this is a rematch, of course. If you like the over, maybe that's where you're going with it. Maybe you're going fight goes to decision. The first time they fought, you had Tecia Torres in around a minus 245 favorite. She won by decision. That was a UFC 188 Velasquez versus Verdum. Crazy fight. Boom goes the dynamite. But in this one, I think it's going to go the same way the first one went. I think Tecia Torres beats Angela Hill.
It's not going to be great to watch either. It's kind of like when we talked about the Colin Anglin, Melzik Bogdasarian. Thank you. It was, if Anglin wins, it's not going to look great. And if Bogdasarian wins, it's going to be awesome. And hey, Bogdasarian won, and it was pretty awesome. Again, I don't think Angela Hill's going to head kick Tecia Torres, but if she is able to get some of those elbows off of the clinch, maybe open up a cut on Torres, maybe that could affect the fight. But personally, I do see the clinch control and the takedown game of Torres winning out in this fight. So I do like Torres by decision in this one.
Matt, both of us going with the Tiny Tornado Tecia Torres to get the win for pound fitness. Can't wait for this fight. If you've got Hill or Torres, you let us know down below in the comments section. And you let us know about the fights that precede this one, that supersede it. You let us know where you're seeding. We've got some great fights coming up that you're not going to want to miss. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. This fight reminds me of that Metro PCS commercial where the kid goes, "Mom, we want Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman." And the mom goes, "Well, we've got Vicente Luque and Michael Chiesa at home." And ultimately, we've got the silent assassin taking on Maverick. And I can't wait for this fight because for Vicente Luque, he is on a heater of a run. And it used to be a heater of a run against guys that you'd never heard of before. And then he loses to Wonder Boy. Now it's against guys that, well, you've heard of before. And one of those guys was a guy that he fought before in Nico Price. And that was a fun fight. And then his last time out, it was a knock him out, drag him out round against Tyron Woodley where, hey, Tyron, you represent us well against that Jake Paul guy. But he looked amazing in that fight. So usually it was, you beat the hell out of Tyron Woodley, like Colby Covington did, and you get another title shot. For Luque, it was you beat him, and now you get Michael. And for Michael's on a run. You look at the 5-on-in for both of these guys, it's 4-1. For Chiesa, it was a loss to Anthony Pettis, then he beat Condit, then he beat Sanchez, then he beat, Dos Anjos, and then he beat Magny. And his last time out, you probably didn't even watch the fight when it was on, because it was on a Wednesday during the day. It was a main event of a weird card, but Michael Chiesa just went full Chiesa, and Neil Magny couldn't go Neil Magny. And I say that because Neil Magny has a very specific style to him. Michael Chiesa does
he's like
as
Liam
well.
Neeson in Taken. He has a very specific set of skills.
And for Chiesa, he's going to hunt you down, take you down, and stay on top of you. And for Vicente Luque, it's, I don't know, he's kind of like Chris Pontius. He's party boy. He's everywhere and nowhere. He does everything and nothing. But he does everything. For Vicente Luque, he's one of the most fun fighters to watch. For Michael Chiesa, he makes it boring until he makes it fun with that submission. I think this is a neat clash of styles. What are you thinking here?
This could be a phenomenal fight. I really have high hopes for it because in Michael Chiesa, he was an interesting fighter at 155, but you knew that at a certain point, the weight cut was taking its toll on him. And then in the Pettis fight, of course, he misses weight, gets rocked, then gets submitted. Not a great look for him. Makes his move up to 170, and he looks massive at 170 pounds. It's the wild thing about Michael Chiesa. He is kind of like one of those Thiago Santoses where it's like, okay, you're at this division and you're still big. It's really nice to see. It's a great example of a guy who was killing himself to make one weight class because he believed that, oh, I need to be bigger to win fights. And then he moved up to 170, and yes, he's still a big fighter, but I feel like it's just more of a confidence in his own skill set now, where it's okay, I don't need to be the bigger fighter to get results. I can just rely on my wrestling and my jiu-jitsu to get those results. And I know when you look at his level of competition at 170, it's a little hit or miss. Like Diego Sanchez wasn't the same Diego Sanchez by the time Michael Chiesa fought him, but his last two fights against RDA and Neil Magny, he did exactly what he had to get the wins against the opponents that he fought. And I know you'd say, oh, well, Matt, everybody does that in every win. Not really. Like Michael Chiesa had a game plan and followed it to a T against RDA. And RDA is a very dangerous fighter at 170. I understand he struggles with wrestlers, but Michael Chiesa isn't that traditional, like, 9-time collegiate Division I All-American. He really is I'm going to go for a body lock. I'm going to really use my frame. I'm going to drag you to the ground, bring you into deep waters. And I thought RDA would be able to defend the takedowns of Michael Chiesa, but he completely proved me wrong, and he looked phenomenal in that fight. The Neil Magny fight was a weird one, though, because Michael Chiesa's striking is wonky, and that's really the best way to say it. And if you can expose him anywheres, it would be on the feet in his striking.
And I think his striking coming into this one, it's going to get a little bit better. And the reason being is Michael Chiesa, he's done all the work with the UFC. He's been on the panel. He's been everywhere. And as a result, he's had to be in Vegas a lot. So he's training at a Syndicate MMA, getting ready for this one, training with the Stricklands of the world, the Platnikovs of the world, so on and so forth. There's a lot of guys at 170 and at 185 that you're going to get great reps in. I think that's going to help him, especially in a fight like this.
Without a doubt. The only weird thing with Michael Chiesa is, go back and watch this fight against Jorge Masvidal. I know it's young in both guys' UFC careers, but it's a really weird fight. Michael Chiesa drops Jorge Masvidal on the feet. I know, it's kind of a weird thing. And Jorge Masvidal submits Michael Chiesa with a head and arm choke off of his back. It's a really weird performance from both guys, but when you look at Michael Chiesa's striking, it is kind of stiff. He is one of those fighters who uses his striking to set up his takedowns. Michael Chiesa knows that, okay, I'm not going to go out there and outstrike Vicente Luque. If Michael Chiesa goes out there working behind the jab, he's going to get knocked out in 30 seconds, and I'm confident in that and in the time that I predict. The thing is that Michael Chiesa doesn't give his opponents distance to really land their power shots, and that's the interesting thing. People don't like it when I say it, but it really applies to this fight. Michael Chiesa kind of has to make it boring, because if you try to have a fun fight with Vicente Luque, you're not going to beat him.
Look at Brian Barberena.
Look at Brian Barberena, and Brian Barberena's not the same fighter that he used to be.
Look at Matt's Brian Barberena highlight from last week.
I mean, Brian Barberena, again, is not the same fighter he used to be, which is what I said in that. But when you look at Vicente Luque, when he gets into brawls, he's a technical brawler. Like, people look at Luque and assume he just throws hooks and has a good chin, and it's okay. If I land, I win. If you land, you win. He's far more technical than that. He has a beautiful calf kick on the inside and the outside of the leg, and he really uses his kicks well to set up his strikes. The other thing that I do have to bring up, because it was the way Masvidal choked out Michael Chiesa, Vicente Luque is a good but not great grappler. If you are going to beat him, you are going to out-wrestle him, hold him down. That's how Leon Edwards beat him. Yeah, Leon Edwards fought Vicente Luque, and he had to out-wrestle him to beat him. Michael Chiesa, though, on the feet, I don't think he can absorb the power of Luque. And if he does get into one of those head and arm chokes or a Darce choke from Luque, that's how Luque beat Tyron Woodley. That's how he beat Nico Price this first time around. That's probably Vicente Luque's best submission. So if Michael Chiesa does find himself, okay, my front leg's starting to get chopped down, kind of like Neil Magny against Santiago Ponzinibbio. I'm reaching a little bit for my takedowns now. I really do think Vicente Luque can knock out anybody in this division, including the champion. I understand it's a stretch, but still, he has that kind of power in this division, and I do feel like Michael Chiesa is just hittable enough that against a guy like Luque, one of those shots is going to get through. It will be interesting because if Chiesa can get a takedown early on in this fight, hold Luque down and sap him of some of that power in that first round, then maybe we do see a more competitive fight in that second and third. And I guess if he took him down easy in the first round, he probably will in the second. But I do think Luque is that unique combination of a power threat on the feet along with great durability, great cardio, and he's going to really develop submission game himself.
Luque's losses in the UFC. The first fight that he had was against Mike Graves, the end of the Ultimate Fighter season 21. For Chiesa, he won the Ultimate Fighter season 15. So 3 fights. You lose to Graves, you lose to Edwards, you lose to Wonderboy. For Michael Chiesa, he's 11-4 in the UFC. Luque, I might not have mentioned it, 13 wins in the UFC. The losses: Jorge Masvidal, Joe Lozon, Kevin Lee, and Anthony Pettis. Big names for both guys out of their losses. And even Mike Graves, but he's still doing it on the regional scene.
Mike Graves is at home, though, like silent assassin. He ain't nothing compared to me.
Vicente Luque open a -160 favorite in this fight. He's a -125 right now. For Chiesa, +140. He's a +103. I bet you end up with par odds in this one. The Tapology votes, 970 of them right now. 65% Luque, 66% by knockout. For the 35% that have Chiesa, 67% by decision, 24% by submission. Again, the blueprint's there, just like Leon Edwards did it. For Vicente Luque, the blueprint's there, just like Masvidal did it, so on and so forth. I like Vicente Luque in this fight an awful lot. Would I be surprised if Chiesa won? No. Because again, look at the odds and look at his fighting style and look at what he did against Neil Magny the last time out. Neil Magny's got decent takedown defense and offensive takedowns, and Michael Chiesa controlled him. So Chiesa could very well do it against Luque. I just don't see it happening. I like the power, I like the volume, and I like the staying power of Vicente Luque in fights as well.
The difference between Magny and Luque is that Magny can't make you pay for your mistakes on the feet like Luque can. Luque ate a clean overhand right from Tyron Woodley to the back of his head. That's the worst place to get hit. It messes up your equilibrium. It can actually kill you if you get hit in the back of the head.
That's why it's illegal.
Exactly. Vicente Luque eats it, wobbles a little bit, and then proceeds to put a beat down on Tyron Woodley like you've never seen. Like, Luque's one of those guys who can stay calm even when he's hurt. And when he does get into those firefights, again, there's a certain level of calmness that he does bring into the cage. He's not a fighter who fights emotionally like a Cody Garbrandt, for instance, where if you hit him, it's like, ugh, now I gotta get that back. He does get into brawls, but again, that's more just because that's what his game is. I like the power of Luque on the feet, and I do really like the leg kicks. Make sure that's something you watch out for, because if he is chopping down that front leg of Michael Chiesa and starting to hurt some of that movement of Chiesa, especially the forward pressure, then Chiesa is eventually going to be a sitting duck for some of those overhands of Luque.
Matt, both of us going with Brazil's Vicente Luque to get the win. Let us know down below in the comments section who you're going with, as well as who you got in the main and co-main. Munoz taking on Aldo, Gane taking on Lewis. You're not going to want to miss that, so keep locked in with Fight Nick Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. Oh, hello. You caught me at a bad time. I'm actually traveling this week, and like I said, when I travel, boom, Manscaped. It comes along with me. I've got the Shed travel bag right there, and it works so good. Let me move some things around. Look at that. We get the weed whacker, the nose hair trimmer. It works great on the go. And I've said that before. I mean, I've got nose hair. It's not like when I travel, the nose hair gets any better. You gotta make sure that you actually use it a little bit more. Look at that. It's the weed whacker. Now, boom. But when I traveled, the best thing about it, 1, 2, 3. You see that? 1, 2, 3. Oh, and now it's all the way down. You gotta make sure you use that travel lock when you're traveling. And what else do I have with me? I've got some great products in the shed, as I always do. I got the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant, and you know how well that stuff works. You want to be fresh when you're on the go. You can also use their great product. It's called the Crop Reviver Ball Toner. And I know Matt Allen, he's got these great products with him at home, and you should too. And if you order the Performance Package from Manscaped, you're gonna get the Shed travel bag. I was able to snag one of their shirts. Like it says, your balls will thank you. And I mean, there's great products there. They also have the great boxer briefs. They're going to fit great. You're going to enjoy them. Make sure you check them out. It's manscaped.com. Use the promo code FNP to let them know that we sent you over there. And like I said, when I'm traveling, I've always got my Manscaped, and it's no word of a lie. I haven't been home for the last couple of weeks, and I'm absolutely enjoying the product. So, like I said, manscaped.com. Use promo code FNP. You're going to get 20% off and free shipping. And as we always say, let's get into it.
Absolute banger in our co-main event. Coming up this weekend, we have Jose Aldo taking on Pedro Munoz. As always, one half of your host to Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, Matt Allen. You can find him on their respective socials at Matt Allen FNP. And I know that at Matt Allen FNP is excited for this fight because for Jose Aldo, he looked great in his last fight. He took on Marlon Vera. It was an awesome fight. Now, he had a 3-fight losing streak before that to Alexander Volkanovski, Marlon Moraes. He lost by split decision. Some people thought that he won. And then he lost to Petr Yan and took way too much damage. So that was the fights that he had, I guess, coming in. His 5-on-in, he had a knockout win over Renato Moicano. And I won't minimize that because he looked amazing in that fight. For Pedro Munoz, the 5-on-in, it's 3-2. The wins, maybe not as sexy because the 5-on-in includes Brian Caraway, Cody Garbrandt, Jimmy Rivera, the wins. The losses, Frankie Edgar by split, and Aljamain Sterling by unanimous decision. Now, I thought that he beat Frankie Edgar in the split decision. We'll talk about it as it comes. But, Matt, that Jimmy Rivera fight, Pedro Munoz looked really good in that one.
He really did. And honestly, that Jimmy Rivera fight, you kind of get the same version of that in the Frankie Edgar fight. Because Frankie Edgar and Jimmy Rivera, although a little bit different, like, they're 98% the same fighter?
They wrestle, they box.
They wrestle, they box, they move. It's, they got the big three covered. And Pedro Munoz did the same things that he did in the Frankie Edgar fight, in the Jimmy Rivera fight. It's just he stuck with the leg kick in the Jimmy Rivera fight. That was the frustrating thing out of Munoz against Edgar, was he starts out kicking the leg, he continues to kick the leg, doesn't kick the leg for 17 minutes, and then goes back to it a little bit at the end of the 5th round. It just showed that Pedro Munoz needs more time in a 5-round atmosphere. And I was going to cut you off while you were doing the intro to this video. Of all the co-main events to make 5 rounds, why isn't this 5 rounds? You give Nate Diaz, Leon Edwards 5. Give me Jose Aldo.
You give Nick Diaz, Robbie Lawler 5.
Exactly. So give me Pedro Munoz versus Jose Aldo for 5 rounds. Because these are two guys that have proved that they can go a hard 25 minutes. They were definitely going to deliver an exciting fight for 25 minutes. Just for me as a fan, I'd be really happy if they did do that. Now I understand we're too far late in the week and neither guy's trained for it, but one person can only hope. This will be an interesting fight because both guys do a lot of the same things. Like Jose Aldo, there's a lot of hooks to the head, there's a lot of leg kicks. Pedro Munoz, the same thing. The real difference, though, comes down to speed for these guys, because I will admit that Pedro Munoz is probably the more durable guy at this age, and it is weird. Jose Aldo is like Shogun. He's always 10 years younger than you probably think he is. He's only 34 years of age, almost 35, but
there's
still.
2 days that separate these guys in age. 2 days.
Which is absolutely insane, because Pedro Munoz, I know he's been around for a little while now, but I still think about him as a much newer fighter than Jose Aldo, which is, Jose Aldo is, again, he was kind of like the Sage North cut of WEC. She turned into being really, 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 really good. And I think the body shots are going to be a huge key in this fight, because Pedro Munoz is a guy who used the calf kick a lot, but he doesn't really check them defensively a lot in return. Jose Aldo's different. Jose Aldo can throw calf kicks, although it's weird. Some fights he will, some fights he won't. It depends on who you ask. Some people think it was a knee injury that was the reason he stopped throwing them. Some people think he broke his foot in the Lamas fight, and that's why he stopped throwing them. I'm not an armchair doctor nor quarterback, so I'll just let it be what it is. But he does kind of have some inconsistencies with his leg kicks. The one thing, though, that I do know he always does for some water in the basement techniques are the body shots with his hands. And there's just something that Pedro Munoz himself doesn't do. Pedro Munoz is a good boxer, but one problem I've always had with Pedro Munoz is that the power's there, the output's there, but the speed isn't. He moves like slow molasses on a cold winter day. He just lands, and when he lands, they're so devastating, the guys tend to fall down. Jose Aldo's going to have a massive speed advantage in this fight, and I really do feel like that's what it's going to come down to. If Munoz lands a damaging shot on Jose Aldo, it's probably more likely to put Aldo down than if Aldo lands a damaging shot on Munoz. The difference is that I think Aldo's going to be able to land 2, 3, 4 power strikes to every one that Munoz lands, and that's why this fight's going to be so much fun. I think both these guys are going to land a lot cleanly on each other. It's just really going to come down to who can stand upright.
I can't wait for it. I mean, you can't beleaguer it. You've seen so much of Jose Aldo, and for Pedro Munoz,
I mean, he got popped close to home here. He got popped in Nova Scotia, so that's his 1-0 contest on his record. But other than that, it's been good. The durability's there. The wrestling's there. Obviously, I would say the guy that used the jiu-jitsu the most out of the two is Pedro Munoz. You know how good Aldo's is, but you never see it. So it's there. He's a Nova União guy. You're going to have Dede Pederneiras most likely in his corner coming into this one. For Munoz, there used to be a few gyms thrown out there, but he's trained for quite some time out of American Top Team. A bevy of training partners there in the lower weight classes. But Matt, when I look at this one in terms of the odds, Aldo open to -138. He's -127 or thereabouts on best fight odds. For Pedro Munoz, open to +115. He's a +103. Most likely the odds go into par as we come into this one. The total Tapology votes, 983 total votes, 71% Aldo, 29% Munoz, 71% of those Munoz voters having to win by decision, 84% of the Aldo voters having to win by decision. So maybe you like the over, maybe you like the fight to go to the decision. I like that, but maybe you like Munoz a little bit more to win by finish?
I have a really hard time predicting this fight because of that. Because Jose Aldo has not shown the ability at 135 pounds to be able to eat a clean shot consistently. I know in the Moraes fight, he did eat a few clean ones, and Moraes did too, and it's weird because neither guy's really known for their durability, but both guys ate really big power shots. Personally, I thought Aldo won that fight. Again, close fight. I don't really care how you scored it. It was close. But Aldo, the durability is a big question mark. Even go back to the Marlon Vera fight. Even when Vera was starting to land on him in the third round a little bit, he turned wrestler mode. I don't know if that's him realizing, okay, I can't eat the same shots that I used to, so now I do have to use the grappling in my back pocket. I see you going like that, but look at the Piotr Jan fight. Fights like that take years off your life. I don't care who you are. It does. Like, I think the strike was like 94-3 at the end of the fifth round when they decided to stop it. It was one of those fights that could have been stopped much sooner. And again, when Aldo did turn into that wrestler mode, I understand he might have wanted to show off more of his skill set, but he was beating Vera on the feet. And when he did eat, like, and I'm not even kidding, he ate like 3 clean shots and immediately went, okay, I'm shooting double legs now. If Munoz does start to land clean on Aldo, at least early on in this fight, and if Aldo is the one initiating the grappling, I think Munoz can win this fight. I actually think Munoz on the mat is a much trickier fighter than Jose Aldo because Jose Aldo might have the black belt jiu-jitsu. I look at Jose Aldo's grappling much more defensively than I do offensively, and actually worry about him if he's the one initiating the offense. If Munoz shoots for a takedown on Jose Aldo, he's just wasting time. He might as well just run in open space because you're not taking down Jose Aldo. Prime Chad Mendez on 1,000 PEDs couldn't even take down Jose Aldo, so I don't think Pedro Munoz, who lacks that wrestling background, is going to be able to go in there and just start shooting doubles and single legs on Aldo. Aldo at one point was probably the best threat to beat Khabib at 155 pounds because his takedown defense was that good. This is a fighter who most people thought, if anything, when he was going to change weight classes, would move up to 155 pounds, not down to 135. So, it's a hard hard fight to pick, and I think I brought up some reasons for why Pedro Munoz can win this fight, but I still have to side with the speed advantage of Jose Aldo. I do think if Aldo is able to land consistently to the body and to the legs of Munoz, I feel like Munoz is going to have a hard time catching up to the speed of Aldo. And if Aldo is the one getting off first, I feel like he will just start to accumulate the shots. But again, this could be one of those fights where Aldo looks great for a round and a half, eats a big overhand, and goes down.
I think exactly that's going to happen. I like Pedro Munoz for that reason. I think Pedro Munoz, again, we talk about it, we reference it. If Teddy Atlas would, if Ken would just shove off for a second. If we could get Teddy Atlas, I'd love to talk to him because the crazy thing is, he goes on Twitter on Saturday nights, watches fight nights, and
tweets about it.
Talks about the fight night cards, and I absolutely love it, but I'd love to get his take on Pedro Munoz because, again, water in the basement, I know Pedro Munoz is going to invest in the legs. The other thing that he will do, he has nice hooks, he has nice power. Again, the speed might not be there because for Aldo, he can land anywhere. He can land when he moves. He can land when he plants. For Pedro, he plants a little bit more, but the other thing that he does, he accepts guys in, he invites them in, and then he counters and lands with great shots. He's been able to do it against the Jimmy Rivera's of the world, the Brian Caraways of the world. But no, I really do like Pedro Munoz for those reasons. And if for any reason it ends up on the mat, which it might not, but if it does, I like Pedro in that circumstance as well. So I'm going to go with Pedro Munoz. Both of these guys are some of those battle-tested guys you're going to find at 135. I absolutely love it. And if we have a hard time with it, I'd like to get your thoughts in the comments section. Maybe you are a true blue. Pedro Munoz is going to get the win. He's 2 days older. He's that much stronger. Maybe you like Jose Aldo here, the burger joint guy. Maybe you're going Aldo. We're split, but I'd love to get your thoughts, and I can't wait for that main event. Ooh, boy, Derrick Lewis taking on Ciryl Gane. You're not going to want to miss that. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. Absolutely love our main event. Coming up this weekend, UFC 265 for the interim heavyweight championship. Forget about all the reasons why we ended up with the belt on the line. Forget it. This is the number one contenders match. We have the Black Beast, Derrick Lewis, competing at home in front of the Houston crowd, taking on France's Le Bon Gamin, Ciryl Gane, and I can't wait for it because, Matt, Fight Night Picks have been pumping the tires of Ciryl Gane since he was with TKO. And listen, for my friends over in Quebec, they made fun of me a few weeks ago when I was there in person. They said that my Blundstones were les bottes acadiennes because I'm French from New Brunswick and not from Quebec. But for Ciryl Gane, he did what I didn't do in Quebec. He put down an absolute beatdown on the competition. And for me, the big win that he had was over Adam Dijkse, who a lot of people thought this guy's going to wreck house over there. Then he's going to become the next Canadian homegrown star. He's going to be in the UFC, and all of a sudden you're lighting the world on fire at heavyweight. And Ciryl Gane said, hold my croissant, we're not doing any of that. And Adam Dijkse has had unsuccessful MMA bouts and boxing bouts since then. So Ciryl Gane,
is why I might not put as much stock as you do in that win.
Ciryl Gane, though, early on, you could tell how special he was. You can tell how relaxed he was in the cage. And he is that classic kickboxer that's worked on his takedown defense, has rounded out his game, and added in the jiu-jitsu category. I think the Dontel Mays fight, that's probably the most telling where, hey, we're at the end of it, we're going to go for a heel hook. And then we got it. For Ciryl Gane, he's continued to face higher levels of competition all the way up, including his last bout not that long ago against Alexander Volkov, where he looked absolutely amazing in that one. It was his cadence, it was his pace, he didn't burn himself out. Same thing could be said against Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and a lot of people were critical because it wasn't the most exciting fight. So some people might not like Ciryl Gane for that fact. Maybe some of his fights aren't the most exciting, maybe some of them are, but overall, very consistent fighter, very, very well-rounded for just being a French kickboxer. But the opposite can be said for Derrick Lewis. This guy's a walking highlight reel.
Here's the thing. Ciryl Gane, is he the more polished striker? Of course he is. Does he have the better offensive takedowns? Okay, Derrick Lewis, oddly enough, isn't the worst offensive wrestler, but you get the idea. Is he the better grappler? Probably. Does he have the better cardio? Probably, but again, there's some question marks around that. That's the thing. Derrick Lewis is probably the worst fighter in most of his fights, but that's never really mattered to him. And that's really the cool thing about Derrick Lewis. He's kind of just a regular guy who just so happens to be one of the top heavyweights in the world. Because Derrick Lewis, inside the cage, extremely exciting. Outside the cage, extremely exciting. And he does have all those it factors when you look for a champion in MMA. And that's why the UFC does not mind promoting a guy like Derrick Lewis. And that's why it's easy to sell Derrick Lewis in this main event. I know a lot of people are upset about there being a vacant title in this fight. But no one's upset that Derrick Lewis is getting this opportunity because everybody realizes that the winner of this fight is definitely the rightful number one contender. Personally, I think Derrick Lewis probably should have fought Francis Ngannou this weekend. Maybe Gane just sits to the side.
I thought Stipe Miocic should have.
Well, okay, good example too. Maybe Gane could have fought Stipe in the meantime. I just thought Derrick Lewis, Francis, there's a little bit of history in there. You could sell that fight easily. The fact that Gane looks so good against Volkov, though, can't go unnoticed. And again, I've been critical of Gane throughout his UFC tenure because, again, and I'm going to kind of throw shade at you, but agree with you as I do this. You could do a much better job selling Ciryl Gane. Don't bring up the submission win over Dontel Mays, because of course he submitted Dontel Mays. When you look at Ciryl Gane, bring up some of the moments in his fights. Look at the Dontel Mays fight and bring up the fact that Dontel Mays couldn't land a single strike, even though he is a boxer at the heavyweight division, and a technical one at that. I look more at the defense that Ciryl Gane showed in that fight as being more impressive than the offensive submission he was able to put on Mays. Go to the Junior Santos fight, and again, you brought up how Drako Rodriguez got hit in the back of the head, so he maybe probably shouldn't have lost against Eamon Zahabi. We only have to say it because you brought it up in that fight. Ciryl Gane did hit JDS in the back of the head, but again, it wasn't his fault. JDS was turning away from it, and if you're turning away from a strike and I hit you in the back of the head, it is not my fault, it's your fault. So that's why the win is right. Again, just making fun of us, Craig. Settle down. For Ciryl Gane, it has been a slow burn, though. And again, the Jairzinho Rozenstruik fight, I thought he won, don't get me wrong. But it wasn't one of those fights that you look at and you go, oh, wow, that guy's going to be champion. He really did need another fight under his belt against another top-level guy. 265-pound Volkov is that guy. And the fact that he did go through a little bit of adversity in that fight proved a lot to me. Like, Alexander Volkov did land clean shots on Ciryl Gane. It was one of the first times we've really seen him get hit. But the great thing was that he absorbed the shots. And like you said, he stayed composed. This is a guy with 9 MMA fights. Only 9 of them. But he fights like somebody who's like 30-10 in their UFC career. And the thing with Gane too, and you can probably expand on this a little bit more than I can, he's kind of a middleweight in a heavyweight's body. He does have that light, he's very light on his feet. He does move a lot for the division. And although he is very big and jacked, he's not a guy who goes out there and relies on his power. He does rely a lot more on his technique, and he does let that show in his fights.
You look at Ciryl Gane, the nice thing that he does, he throws that jab out there. He can switch stances. He can work from both stances. He can throw to the head, to the body, to the legs, and he doesn't burn himself out, and he stays in every single fight. And that was true in a 3-round atmosphere. That's been especially true in a 5-round atmosphere. He's one of the most cerebral fighters you're going to find, and the way that he moves on the balls of his feet, you're right. It's almost, and it's a little bit of a stretch, but you watch Wonder Boy back and forth, then I switch stance, back and forth, and you have to worry about every single weapon. And if you take him down, well, it's no picnic either. With Derrick Lewis, it's weird because, again, it seems like he's always an underdog. And the odds for this fight, I just want to bring them up now. Ciryl Gane opened a minus 325. He's a minus 354 thereabouts. For Derrick Lewis, open plus 275. Still about there, plus 276. You're going to have variance like that. It's just the averages from best fight odds. But he was about this big of an underdog when he took on Curtis Blaydes, and it was just a punch from hell that knocked Curtis Blaydes out completely, and then some donkey decided to call him on his phone. Don't do that. Don't do that. But when I look at this one, Matt, Derrick Lewis, he's won 4 fights in a row since he lost in his title bid against Daniel Cormier, Junior Dos Santos. Again, the Cormier fight was before that, but that was weird.
Well, he got hurt in GDS fight too. He tore his ACL. The thing about Derrick Lewis is everything is weird. That's why it's so hard to predict Derrick Lewis fights. Like, Curtis Blaydes is better than Derrick Lewis at the sport of MMA. But it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Stats don't matter in MMA. That's the big point that I try to hammer home. If you just look at stats, Ciryl Gane's better than Derrick Lewis in everything. Would you be surprised at all if you woke up on Sunday and Derrick Lewis knocked out Ciryl Gane? I wouldn't, because that's what he can do. And he has that kind of power from the first second of the fight till the last second of the fight. This is the thing. Derrick Lewis can be huffing and puffing in the first 30 seconds of a fight.
And then all he has to do is throw a 5-point shot from the free throw line. He has that.
Exactly. He does have that kind of power. Volkov beats the brakes off him until he doesn't. It happens a lot in Derrick Lewis fights.
Marcin Tybura.
Shamil Abdurakhimov even. It's just a really weird thing with Derrick Lewis. And I do think he is going to land on Ciryl Gane at some point. The real question just comes down to, can Ciryl Gane eat the power of Derrick Lewis? And what does he do if he does eat the power of Derrick Lewis? Again, he can't eat the power of Derrick Lewis because no one can. Like, if you fight Derrick Lewis, all you should be basing your game on is how do I not get hit by this guy? And for Gane, it'll be interesting because he can be all the way in. He's got a really nice clinch. He can throw a lot of elbows on the inside. But that is going to be one of those ranges where Derrick Lewis can land one of those wiry hooks or around the guard that you don't really expect coming. And those are the shots that can hurt you. For Gane, I do think he's going to have to make this fight look a little bit like the Jairzinho Rosenstrike fight. I know people aren't going to be happy about that, myself included probably. But that's going to be his best path to victory without a doubt. Be technical, use your range, use your volume, but don't overcommit against a guy like Derrick Lewis.
Both of these guys have a storyline with your champion right now. Derrick Lewis beat him in the worst fight ever. Beat him, but it was the worst fight ever. Ciryl Gane used to train with him every day before Francis Ngannou blew the doors off, doesn't like Ferdinand Lopez anymore, and trains out of Extreme Couture, and became a wrestler. So that's why it's fun, because again, a lot of people even still say, oh, they train together, but they haven't trained together in a really long time. So that's what makes it fun. Regardless, like, 1A, 1B, whoever wins this fight, it's a fun fight against Francis Ngannou. But for me, it's weird because I've been on the trains of fighters. I talked about them a lot. I picked them to win and so on and so forth. And then the one fight I don't pick Brandon Moreno to win. And I'm this guy that discounts, discredits, and doesn't like Brandon Moreno, which couldn't be further from the truth.
It's a great
So you hate to say, oh, I'm just sticking to my guns, but I think I've laid out a pretty big path. Ciryl Gane, with the mix of MMA that he brings into the fight, I think he wins this fight 9 times out of 10. There's always that one where Derrick Lewis knocks him out. The votes on Tapology, 994 of them, 72% Gane, 61% by decision. For the 28% that have Derrick Lewis, 90% by knockout, so they're in agreement too. I like Ciryl Gane to win this fight.
Okay, I like Ciryl Gane to win this fight, but again, he could eat like a double flying knee from Derrick Lewis, and I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Too.
Derrick Lewis throws wheel kicks to open fights, guys. He weighs 265 pounds. I don't think you realize just how ridiculous that is. He does have that like Javi Ayala type of athleticism. I know it probably should be the other way around. Javi Ayala has Derrick Lewis levels of athleticism, but you can't judge the book by its cover when it comes to Derrick Lewis. He has by far the more power in this fight, and I really do feel like if he lands that one shot, it will be night-night for Ciryl Gane. But Gane isn't hittable, and at the heavyweight division, that can take you a very, very long way. And it will be interesting, too, because we do often say, Francis Ngannou just traded Ferdinand Lopez, that kind of blew up. We also have to bring up the fact that Francis did get better when he left there, though, and that really is the interesting thing. Like, Ciryl Gane already looks this good right now with this gym. It will be interesting to see, okay, that gym took Francis as far as they could. Kind of like Sanford did with Kamaru Usman. Sanford's still a great gym. It's just you can always kind of reach your limits with a guy. Then Usman goes to another gym. He levels up even more. I feel like Francis did a similar thing, so I would personally love to see that storyline of Gane versus Francis in their next fight. So again, I like Ciryl Gane in this one. Again, I don't think his grappling's as good as we might sell it on this channel, although I do think he's a better grappler than Derrick Lewis. I think he's going to win by decision, though.
If he gets on top of Derrick Lewis, Lewis just has that just get up attitude, and he's able to do it, and his cardio lasts.
That's the weird thing. The thing about Gane is that he might get the takedown. I don't think he's going to be able to hold the takedown on Derrick Lewis. I actually think just get up kind of works on guys like Ciryl Gane because Gane's grappling is based off his physical strength a lot of the time. Gane isn't a guy like Brian Ortega who goes, okay, I'm going to float from your guard into side control, then I'm going to apply a triangle. I'm going to kind of use physical strength. Yes, the tools are there, but he's still kind of building up his grappling to get to the point to where his striking is. I think that, yes, if he takes Derrick Lewis down, Lewis will be able to get back up, and that's the thing that Ciryl Gane can't find himself in. He can't find himself in one of those tweener fights where he finds himself going for a lot of like quick rush shots into a takedown attempt, like trying to rush things. He has to stay composed because again, when you rush things, that's when you leave yourself open. When you leave yourself open, Derrick Lewis tends to go home with a much bigger check.
Matt, in this fight, we're both going with Francis Ciryl Gane to get the win. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Derrick Lewis fans and admirers down below in the comment section. You let us know who you're going with in this fight. Matt, UFC 265 is absolutely stacked. So many great fights. Co-main event. Aldo taking on Munoz. I'm excited for Ode Osbourne's fight. It's a shame that it's an Ode Osbourne card this weekend, not a Conor McGregor card. But overall, there's a lot of great ones. And actually, there's a pretty good interview with Ode on the channel. So make sure you check that out. If you got time, check out our second channel. It's 15-minute card breaks. If you like sports cards and kind of like us, maybe you want to check it out. But overall, it should be a great week. If fights fall out, we'll have them updated here as usual. And on Saturday, you've got Question Mark Kicks that starts 2 hours before the prelims, as well as our fight companion for UFC 265. I can't wait for that. So make sure you're tuned in. Toss a like and a sub so you know when we go live as well. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.